And we're back, guard, the Gavin and Zach guard, always talking smack guard. How you guys doing today?
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Vanguard. Good to see you, Zach. Looks like you have a fisheye lens going on your laptop or something. Is that normal?
Yeah, I just fucked with it a little bit. I wanted to know if anybody would notice if I changed any of the settings in StreamYard or whatever, and I was just looking at it. I thought it looked a little trippy and bigger than normal. I'll throw it back in a second, but yeah, I wondered if anybody else would be able to notice that.
Yeah, it doesn't look bad necessarily. I'm just like, it looks like you have a fisheye lens on your computer. Looks kind of cool though. Yeah. Anyway, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to the show. Really glad to be back here. We got some interesting news to go over today. Yesterday, there was basically an attempted coup in Brazil. Basically, Brazil's January 6th, which happened on January 8th. They could have just done it a couple days earlier, and it would have been their January 6th. But no, they had to wait for January 8th. And it was pretty fucking embarrassing. Basically, none of the Congress people and Lula himself, they weren't even in town. So all these fools, all these idiots were just storming government buildings, causing a ruckus for no apparent reason, with no apparent end goal in mind other than to make a scene, I guess, and cause a ruckus.
Restore the rightful victor.
Yeah, but like with January 6th, the Congress was certifying the election results that day. You know, that's why it happened on January 6th. That's the day Congress was certifying the election results, and that's why they had all the Congress members cowering in fear in the House during the insurrection. When it comes to this Brazilian coup attempt, there wasn't any election results being certified. Lula has already been, confirmed as the president. So it really was truly just
Bolsonaro had already left the country.
Yeah, exactly. He's been chilling in Miami or somewhere in Florida, I think.
Miami.
Yeah, and now apparently he's in the hospital. So we're going to be getting into all of those details.
KFC. I was worried about that when I saw that dude eating KFC. I was like, bro, I don't know if the international KFC is better, because when you travel to other countries, you do see a lot of KFC, especially in depending on where you're at in the world. Like, KFC is really popular, and I'm like, do they just give us the shit KFC here because they're like, Americans have no taste buds, they'll eat the pink slime from McDonald's, like we don't have to hustle? But then I just see like this man who clearly has like a lot of wealth at his disposal in America, in Miami, just sitting there eating fucking Kentucky Fried Chicken from a chain. Just sadly, man, no wonder this dude has like gastrointestinal problems or whatever the fuck keeps sending him to the hospital. He literally is just like a parallel of Donald Trump at this point, like a fast food eating, like, wannabe insurrectionist. I don't even think to Bolsonaro's credit, I don't think he wanted to associate with those specific brand of support. I guess if you could call it credit, I'm just saying in comparison to Trump really egged on those crazies. I guess, Bolsonaro didn't. So if whatever, coup attempt happened on January 6th was a diet coup, this might be coup zero. Just like absolutely pathetic response, but still, kind of adjacent to what we had going on in America a few years back.
Absolutely. Yeah, I know it was totally pathetic. And by the way, before we get into the stream for today, let's quickly shout out the patron community. Shout out to the patrons. Thank you guys so much for the support. You guys know we like to start and end all of our live streams with a big old shout out to the patrons. A sincere thank you for your support. We wouldn't be able to do the show without you guys, which is why we like to start and end all of our shows with a big shout out. So thank you guys so much. We really appreciate it. And the link's going to be in the description as always. If you want to support the show, throw us $5 a month. It really does go a long way. So yeah, huge shout out to the patrons for making the show possible.
Yeah, shout out to everybody. Comrades, Vanguardians, Jarrell, Comrades, Dots. Just hit that like button and subscribe button. And if you want to throw some cash our way, hit that Patreon link in the description. You can participate in our monthly Q&A with priority. Shout out to everybody for keeping the lights on. We got a juicy one for you today.
Absolutely, hella juicy. Shout out to the patrons for your support. And shout out to Christina Suzo for the $10. Really appreciate that. Christina, first super chat of the live stream. RBN featured a clip on Jimmy Dore criticizing Crystal Ball from your show, criticizing your take on it. There's the Jimmy stands on one side and everyone else on the other. Sad face. Congrats on KC win. Yeah, well, shout out to you, Christina. Really appreciate the $9.99. And I actually did watch that video. the clip that they released, and I was like, I'm interested in what criticisms they have. It was dumber than I could have possibly imagined. It was some brain dead bullshit. No offense to our homies over there at RB, and I think it was just CJ that was actually doing the roast of the Vanguard. But yeah, basically just complete idiocy. No substantive criticism, and no, they didn't even address the points we were making either. Saying we were basically just tone policing Jimmy Dore, when in reality we have no problem with Jimmy Dore's tone. In fact, when it's directed at the right people, the right targets, I love Jimmy Dore's aggression and his antagonistic nature. The issue we had with Jimmy Dore's breaking points takedown and his specific criticisms of Crystal Ball was that they weren't founded. They were untrue. They were inaccurate. And there was no addressing of that. So yeah, I thought that was weak sauce, to put it lightly.
Yeah, it was funny. I woke up and Jordan had messaged me, just kind of like LOLing at the video, and so I went and looked it up. But there was a problem with the audio quality in the video. I couldn't really make out what he was saying over all the ball gargling, just the downright fellatio. So I was like, I wasn't quite sure. Maybe they'll re-record it and upload it, so it's in somewhat consumable. But yeah, all I heard was like, So yeah, I mean, couldn't really be sure what they were trying to say.
Yeah, it was embarrassing, man. I would recommend checking it out just for comedic value alone. But yeah,
I love the like a comparison of Jimmy Dore to Malcolm X. How embarrassing is that? It's like, oh, you were critical of Jimmy Dore, you probably would have hated Malcolm X too, because they're basically the same guy. It's like, oh my gosh, you are hysterical, you are delusional. This is sad, just sad. So anyway, the Vanguard would hate Malcolm X. LOL. We are ambulance chasers, which is hilarious. And it's like, okay, like I'll get it. Like, we're not serious activists. I never pretend to be a serious activist on the show. I always identify myself as a bartender with a loud mouth. That's how I like to roll. Right. But the audacity to make an entire stim channel, right? Like the entire and to be fair, guys, we kind of created this whole complex on the internet, right? Like we gave everybody the roadmap when we were starting out making this force the vote content, and people realized you could be an obscure channel, but if you agreed with Jimmy Dore, you would get like attention. Then everybody was just like, oh, all we will do is just agree with Jimmy. We will become a Jimmy Dore parrot account. And that's essentially what their channel is, which is fine. If like, there are a bunch of K-pop simp channels, there are a bunch of like stan accounts for all kinds of what do they call it, fandoms, right? And essentially what RBN is it's just like a Jimmy Dore fandom page at this point. It's essentially like the people who get obsessed with like One Direction or whatever, what's that one K-pop band where the kid had to go do like mandatory military service in Korea, that's really big.
Yeah,
what's that ginormous K-pop?
BTS, right?
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's basically like a stan account for one of those, which is absolutely fine. But then to just be like the Vanguard's ambulance chasers because they talk about shit that happens on the internet, I'm like, bro, like, yeah. I just think it's funny. It's not really worth dogpiling on them or whatever. It's hard to get actually worked up about it when you know that like their entire model for success is just praise Jimmy Dore,
dick riding.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just like, okay, well, that's your show, and that's fine. But okay, I'll be your target for a day. I mean, yeah. Like 800 people watch that video. Like, fucking who cares?
Yeah, no, I thought it was pretty funny. And yeah, to say that because we criticize Jimmy Dore, we would hate Malcolm X. What the fuck does Jimmy Dore have to do with fucking Malcolm X? Like, what?
He's leading
was Malcolm X a massive
revolutionary
fucking
coalition.
Turf? Yeah. Was like, I don't know. It's just whatever, bro. Completely unserious, to borrow a phrase. But yeah, thank you so much, Christina. Really do appreciate the $9.99. And thank you so much, Nasser Faroud, for the $1.99. Really appreciate that. Caught stream on time for once. What's up, dudes? Well, what's up? Right back at you, Nasser. Thanks so much for tuning in.
Yeah, shout out to you, Nasser. I really appreciate that. Always glad to see some familiar faces and people who enjoy watching us live. Glad you could tune in. And it looks like you follow up with another chat right here saying that Yusek and Christina's chat. You guys might be the only ones on YouTube immune to audience capture, and it's via admirable. Keep it up, bros. I don't think we're necessarily like immune to audience capture. The thing is that Gavin and I are both really conscious of it, and we can kind of hold each other accountable. And like we both know when something's bullshit, and like we can talk it out and be like, okay, how do we want to cover this? You know, like blah blah blah, which I think is good. And also just the fact that we've already destroyed our channel from a degree where it was growing like wildfire, and then we were like, no, we're gonna go to war with everybody because we have morals. It's like, why stop now? Why take it easy on anybody at this point? You know, we like to stand on our own 2 feet, and it's really hard to grow your show if you're standing on your own 2 feet, but I'd rather have that than, you know, just again be a simp channel, right? Like at that point I would just make like a Quentin Tarantino fan account.
Yeah. Yeah, we try our best, Nasser. Really appreciate that. And yeah, our philosophy here is that we'd rather lose 500 or 1,000 subscribers if it means we speak our mind. You know, we know how our takes are going to be perceived. We know the damage we're inflicting to our subscriber count or whatever when we come out with a certain take that we know will be unpopular. But that's how we roll here. You know, we're going to say what we think. That's the point of our show. If you guys didn't want to hear our actual opinions, then why the fuck would you be watching the Vanguard? You know? So I really appreciate you for recognizing that, Nasser. It really does mean a lot. And shout out to you, Zach, the Celtics guy, for the $2. Didn't agree with the takes, but still support you. I'm guessing you're referring to our takes about Jimmy Dore. Either way, you know, we appreciate you being part of our audience, man. We really do. And yeah, we have an ideologically diverse audience. We don't want an echo chamber show where everyone agrees with us and where we just say what they want us to say or what you guys want us to say. That's not the point. You know, we're not just here to reaffirm your already held beliefs and biases. We're here to give our opinions. So we really appreciate that, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And shout out to Zach, the Celtics guy. And it looks like I also got us blocked by Anna Kasparian not too long ago. And I barely ever use Twitter. So I fucking just got on there and like post one smirky thing. I think that's when she's like, oh, yeah, fuck these people, right? So it happens. It happens. I wouldn't take it too personally.
Yeah, we're blocked by Anna Kasparian and Dave Rubin. I think that's... Are we blocked by anyone else?
Of note, I don't know. I mean, Sabby blocked us after I called her out for never, ever, ever, ever challenging Jimmy Dore, and it hit too close to home, so she couldn't like grapple with that criticism at all, and had to block us and pretend that we'd never been nice to her ever, and didn't have her on our show when she was still paying for views on her fucking channel. But whatever.
Yeah, shout out to you, Zach. Really appreciate that. Yeah, join the club, bro. We are also blocked by Anna Kasparian. And shout out to you, Kevin.
$5 vote to keep the fisheye. I like it until Gavin gets back. I'm taking both windows, and so I'll just keep it spread out, because then I could do one of those, like, you know, big baller type videos. It's like, hey, I'll make like a Mr. Beast style thumbnail for us. Gavin will be like, you know. I also kind of like it because I feel like I'm in like an NSYNC music video from back in the early aughts. Like,
it does have those vibes for sure. Got major 2000s music video vibes,
especially with this oversized hoodie, you know, with the multicolors. I'm just like, I'm in it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Kevin Maxwell Smith. Got a couple more, I think. Thank you so much, Kevin, for the $4.99. Tone policing can be okay, TBH. Sometimes people sound goofy and need to be called out. Can't you get your point across if nobody likes you? Yeah, I mean, that is fair. Obviously, sometimes it is fair to question the tone in which information is being delivered if it's in an unproductive way. But that just wasn't our problem with Jimmy Dore. I don't give a fuck about his tone. The problem was that he was being dishonest, like straight up dishonest, misrepresenting someone who agrees with him, on the substance. So if you're just misrepresenting the opinion of someone who is your ideological ally and who agrees with you on the strategy in question, you can deliver that in whatever tone you want. The point is that, you know, and that's what a lot of Jimmy simps do all the time, is like, if you criticize Jimmy for anything, no matter how valid of a criticism it is, you're tone policing Jimmy Dore. It's like, no, I don't care about his fucking tone. I care about the content of his, you know, fucking opinion and the accuracy of it and the substance.
Not only that, I feel like it's pretty hard to argue with our video considering Jimmy Dore did the best arguing with Jimmy Dore in that video. I literally played him praising Crystal Ball for coming out and being in support of this plan and shaming the squad members for not having, you know, their shit together and not being a, you know, unified front, right? And then he's like trying to like take an out of context clip of her not being like pissed off enough about it for his taste to try and portray her as some sort of like enemy of the people. Absolutely ridiculous and shameful. And it was obviously petty and personal because of his like, you know, grudge against Kyle Kalinske, right? So anyway.
Yeah, shout out to you, Kevin. Really appreciate the $5. And shout out to Clave Sounds. Thank you for the $2. Arbian is a cult. You're right about that. You know, I don't really even watch their content, so I don't know if they're a cult. But it does seem like, you know, they've been very dishonest, at least in their criticisms of us. Like, we're not above criticism. Disagree with us all you fucking want. We disagree with people all the time. I have no problem with that. But the criticisms have been very bad faith. And yeah. So I mean, we'd be happy to engage with them if they want to invite us on their show and hash it out. Like, I'm not afraid of them. I'm more than happy to do so. But it seems like they'd rather just take pot shots and mischaracterize our viewpoints.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't call them a cult, and I think on the if you get to the bare bones politics, they support a lot of policies that we support across the network, and you know, obviously they're a network, which is different from the Vanguard. Like, they're not a monolith. I don't know what everybody's views are on everything, right? So that's different too. It's kind of like the Young Turks. Like, you know, I mean, I don't know what John Iorola thinks when I like take shots at TYT. I'm mostly just referring to like the main faces of it, right? But yeah, I mean, at this point, it's just like, they're there to be to be cheerleaders for Jimmy's audience and like pick up the crumbs, and that's fine. But it's just different than what we're doing over here, I feel like.
Also, there was some major projection in their video about us. They were like, you know, they're just defending Crystal Ball because they want to get her back on their show. I'm like, bro, literally your entire show is licking Jimmy Dore's asshole so that he'll continue promoting your content and coming on your show. Just saying. I'm just saying. Sounds like projection to me.
Also, we've been like massively more critical of Crystal Ball than they have ever dreamed of being of Jimmy Dore. Anyone on their network has never been like, even when Sabby was doing a good job and we praised her for her interview that she did with Nick Brana, she went right around, forget in one ear out the other. Like, for who cares? You know, Jimmy forgave her sins and he's back to promoting Nick Brana, and she's back to not talking about how the People's Party is a scam.
Absolutely correct. What do you want to start with today, Zach? We have a couple different stories. We wanted to talk about some local news involving a new challenger to Josh Hawley for the Senate.
Let's kick it off with that one. That was a good ad too. So I'll be interested to see. Like, look, I know we're gonna get we're gonna move on to that we should abandon electoral politics argument, but I just want everybody to say, to understand that Josh Hawley is a unique evil in this country. This man is horrible. He ran on right to work. Okay, he ran on taking away laws that provided mandated coverage for people with pre-existing conditions. He opposed that. Even though his own son had a pre-existing condition, and he would use that as a wedge to like gain people's trust, and then turned around and, you know, abandoned that principle. Okay, he was cheerleading the insurrection. He's a literal white supremacist. Okay, the guy is ugly as fuck. He's also an aristocrat, if you care about any of that shit, right? And I don't think Lucas Kuntz is perfect, and I'm not going to send my money to the guy, but this is a race to watch if you think that if you're interested in change in American politics, this would be one to follow, because I think that Lucas Kuntz does create a unique foil for Josh Hawley, and I think that he lays that out in his ad. But what did you make of this announcement, Gavin?
Yeah, Lucas Kuntz is an interesting character. He's definitely more of a Bernie-crat, so he's definitely, you know, a bit more populist than your average Democrat. You're right, Zach. He's not perfect, not even close. But as far as Democrat candidates for Senate go, he's definitely better than your average. I would compare him to like a John Fetterman as far as his, you know, pros and cons. So I think he's an interesting character, like I said. And I think that in a state like Missouri, he does have a uniquely populist brand, which makes him uniquely suitable to run against a guy like Josh Hawley, and which does give him a better chance than just your average corporate Democrat who would traditionally get destroyed in a state like Missouri. Now, to be fair, I still think that, Josh Hawley will unfortunately probably hang on to his seat, given that Missouri is as red as it is. But if any Democrat's going to do it, it would be a Democrat like Lucas Kunce. He's also a veteran, and he is very populist. Like I said, he's very pro-union. He's pro-legalization. He's endorsed by Bernie Sanders. At least he was the last time around. And it's going to be interesting to see how this develops. Obviously, it's not like he's guaranteed the nomination. There'll probably be some shitty corporate Democrat that'll come in at the last minute and try to suck up all the attention and all the support from him because he's not corporate enough. We saw that happen in the last Senate race, which Kunce ran against, or ran in. What was her name?
Trudy Bush Valentine.
Yeah, the heiress to the Anheuser-Busch fortune, who jumped in at the last minute and was unfortunately able to take the nomination from Hawley. But yeah, like it says here, Kunce is a Marine veteran and a self-described populist who lost the primary last year. He announced his plans on Friday morning, bashing Hawley as a coward and a fake. Kunce's opening campaign video, released on the second anniversary of the insurrection, zeroes in on the senator's famous raised fist response to those protesters. And yeah, I guess we can take a look at this video.
My name is Lucas Kunce. I've done a lot of running in my life. Running to stay healthy, running to fight for my country, running to defend democracy. Oh, and by the way, that guy you're looking at, that's not me. That's our current U.S. Senator Josh Hawley. This guy. Or maybe you'd better recognize him running for his life a few hours later. I swear, this coward's always running from something. And now, this is the guy who's writing a book telling every single one of us how to be a man. Now this is me, Lucas Kunce, running for Senate. I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, but I did have the support of my community, which made me who I am today. When things get tough, Missourians deserve a U.S. Senator who will stand up for them, not run away. That's why I'm running to replace Josh Hawley, because we couldn't be more different. When his banker daddy sent Joshua to a fancy prep school miles from his hometown, my family in Jeff City was relying on our neighbors to survive bankruptcy and medical bills. When he graduated from law school, he joined one of the world's most elite corporate law firms. I joined the Marine Corps to pay back the community that took care of me. When he was climbing the ladder to become another corrupt politician, I was serving my country and working to put an end to overseas wars. When giant corporations were stripping Missouri for parts, he attacked workers and shipped our jobs away, while I fought to take power back for American workers and small businesses. And when he voted against relief for vets like me who were exposed to toxic burn pits, I stood up alongside thousands of veterans to hold him accountable. I'm Lucas Kunce, and I approve this message because Josh Hawley is a fraud. By the time I'm done with him, the whole world's gonna know it. So keep on running, Josh. Keep on running.
Yeah. So, look, I already see the comment section, right? Like, of course, this guy's not perfect. He is not. He does not carry my own politics to a T, but I think he's an interesting candidate to watch because he does a couple of things. One, I think, Gavin, you're right to characterize him as like more of a Bernie-crat, right? Like he does embody a lot of the post Bernie Sanders policies that we saw a lot of people pick and choose from throughout the Democratic Party. And I just think that he also embodies like an actual Midwestern kind of guy that could win, right? And obviously when you're dealing with one of the most nefarious senators in all of American politics in the form of Josh Hawley, I mean, this guy is a literal insidious bastard, that it makes sense to keep an eye on this guy. And like I said, I'm not going to be sending the guy any money. He has some, sketchy campaign contributions last time around, and I'm going to be keeping my eye on him in the similar way to how, I thought John Fetterman was a clear and obvious choice over Dr. Oz, for different reasons than Josh Hawley. I think Josh Hawley is even more nefarious than Dr. Oz. But, I can't send money to somebody that's going to go on a debate stage and say, like, I do support fracking in Pennsylvania, or, I did chase that dude with a gun because I wanted to take him to jail, and, all kind of shit. I don't regret any of that. And it's like, well, you know what I mean? But what are your thoughts about this? You're muted, by the way.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I think that Lucas Kunce is definitely an interesting character. As I said, he's better than your average Democrat. Do I think that this challenge to Josh Hawley will ultimately be successful? Unfortunately, not, because I think that the Democratic Party is going to. I don't think they're going to support this guy. They didn't last time, and there's certainly going to be some other corporate shill, some Democrat hack that enters the race and will try to smear him like they were able to last time. So if the Missouri Democratic Party let this guy have a fair shake and actually win the nomination, if he was able to win the nomination, then that would be one thing. But I just don't see that happening. Missouri Democratic Party has a very spotty at best track record of nominating candidates that even have a chance at winning against Republicans in a general election. And again, if they were actually able to coalesce behind Lucas Kunce, who I do think is a uniquely capable candidate, I think that would be one thing. However, I just can't see it happening. Unfortunately, he's too closely aligned to the Bernie Sanders style of politics. And also, I see you, Brian, saying that he's a NATO apologist and a supporter of the United States military-industrial complex. If there's something specific that you saw from Kunce that would suggest that, then feel free to send it my way. But one of the things I actually like about Kunce is the fact that he's been pretty outspoken about ending our forever wars and about his anti-interventionist politics in general, which of course are informed by his time in the military himself. Here's a tweet that I saw where he says, "For decades, the top bipartisan priority in Congress has been wasting trillions on wars and nation building overseas. If they cared about our national security, they'd invest in building up our own country. Here's what nation building America looks like," with a link to an article. And this is pretty consistent with the tone that I've seen him strike on this specific subject of foreign policy. It seems like he's largely pretty interventionist and thinks that the money would be better spent here than abroad in these pointless, forever wars. So, like I said, Brian, I'm sure he's made some comments I disagree with. Maybe he said solidarity to Ukraine or something like that, and that makes him a NATO apologist. I'm not sure what exactly you're referring to there, but I think foreign policy is actually one of the areas where he's kind of made a distinction between his politics and that of the mainstream Democratic Party.
Yeah, and if you look right here, let's pull up this other tweet that I've got, Gavin, from Lucas Kunce. This is from not long ago. Well, actually, I guess it's almost a year at this time. Fuck, I got to start looking at 2022 like it's this year. But anyway, every day Ukrainians are under assault from a tyrant. The only way we'll destroy Putin is by defunding his war machine. That starts with support for Ukraine and sanctions on Russian oligarchs, but it will only end when we cure Europe's addiction to Russian oil and natural gas. So maybe this is what you were referring to. I don't know if this means that. I don't know if this means that he's actually trying to send military support. But that could be what you were inferring to from back in the day. But I mean, I do agree that, yeah, he's like, I mean, I agree that we should support Ukrainians, right? Like, as they are being an invaded country. I just don't think we should support them by, sending, military aid over there. So maybe this is what you were referring to. But I don't know. Maybe I would be interested to know more about that. It looks like Brian says that Kunce supported the proxy war in Ukraine and NATO expansion. So to what extent he has supported the war in Ukraine, we might disagree on, but I'm not sure.
Yeah. Again, definitely don't sign off on everything this guy stands for. If he does support NATO expansion, that's certainly an area of disagreement. But thanks for the super chat, Brian, and thanks for letting us know about that. Also, shout out to you, Victor, for the 199. It's also a presidential year, and Missouri is red. Correct. Another reason why, unfortunately, I don't think it's going to be very likely to unseat Josh Hawley, despite the fact that he is such a uniquely just hateable candidate, right? The fact that all these Missourians are going to be turning out to vote for the Republican nominee, whether it's Trump or DeSantis or someone else, that's definitely going to help out Hawley as well.
Yeah, that's the other downside. I just think that the one thing that Kunce has going for him is that if he, and this is just shows how fucked the Democratic Party is and unserious and undemocratic and, basically worthless it is the fact that his biggest hurdle, honestly, even in a red state, going up against a guy like Josh Hawley is going to be getting through the primary, right? And I think his only chance of getting through the primary is if they say, okay, we've kind of did away with this guy when Trudy Bush Valentine beat him last year. Like now it is a, presidential year, Missouri's red. Like maybe we can afford to not put as much money into a candidate that's running against him. Maybe we'll just let this guy run and get beat by Josh Hawley. He couldn't possibly win. So like, let's just not pay any attention to this Missouri race. There's no good candidates run. Probably if Trudy Bush Valentine doesn't want to get humiliated again, she won't run and, helps finance it and all that kind of shit. So I think that's how he could potentially slip through and be one of those weird head fake differentiators. Like we've said, he's not perfect. Like, he said some things about Ukraine where it's like, no, I don't want to give money to Ukraine. But it's also like, Bernie Sanders has said some shit about Ukraine that I didn't agree with also. Right. And so would I take a Bernie Sanders senator over a Josh Hawley senator? Of course, any day of the week, twice on Sunday. So it's just a matter of, I don't agree with these guys on everything. I think that he's, definitely going to be less interventionist than Josh Hawley. I think he'll be less austere than Josh Hawley by a wide margin. I think he's going to stop feeding into, this red pilling of young men on the internet, and honestly, like flirting with like theologistic fascism, right? Theologian fascism. Like that's where Josh Hawley's base is at. Let's not forget that. Like this guy is truly an insidious, odious fuck. So I'm not making light of the disagreements I have with people like Bernie Sanders and like Lucas Kuntz or like John Fetterman. But I think if you compare them to somebody who is at the absolute shit end of the Republican Party, we're talking about like Mitch McConnell, Lindsey Graham, and over next to them, a guy like Josh Hawley. He's going to vote with them like that all the time. He's just got slightly different priorities when it comes to like who his meat and potatoes are. They're the fucking red pill internet bros. So anyway, a long-worded answer, but
yeah, and that's the other thing about Josh Hawley. Not only is he a fucking fascist, but also he's trying to like brand himself as some Jordan Peterson-esque figure who's, out here on television telling men to stop watching porn and, go clean your room and get a girlfriend and, ask her out on a date and get your life together. Like, oh, bro, you're a U.S. senator. No one gives a fuck. Like, why are you out here offering personal advice to disaffected young men and trying to act like you're Jordan Peterson or something? Like, just do your fucking job, legislate, represent Missourians. No one's asking for your opinion on pornography.
Yep, absolutely.
Do you want to segue in? Oh, shout out to you, Jaybird D. Really appreciate that generous $20 super chats. Thank you so much. Wouldn't this race in nearby Missouri be a perfect, not just nearby Missouri? It's all of Missouri. It's a Senate race for Missouri, and we live in Missouri, so not really nearby. It's just Missouri. Either way, wouldn't this race in nearby Missouri be a perfect opportunity for you guys to get in the van as promised and speak to people on the ground about their feelings, ideas, hopes, dreams, and rationales? Well, Jaybird, just so you know, we already have put out one documentary, one van documentary, and we have another couple that are cooking right now and should be released in the near future. So we already have delivered on the promise to put out van content. In case you weren't aware, you can find our first documentary about the great Jesse Ventura on our channel under the documentary playlist. And like I said, we have a couple more coming out for you guys in the near future, one of which is about Casey Tenets, which is also a local Missouri organization that's fighting for tenants' rights in Kansas City. Super excited to release that. But yeah, we'll definitely do some reporting about the Senate race. We plan on doing a lot of election reporting in general, and this would certainly make for an interesting subject matter.
Oh yeah, for sure. And we also covered the tent city when that happened in Kansas City. The problem is, Jaybird D, and I know this is kind of a tongue-in-cheek comment from you because I've been following you in the chat, is that for all of the kerfuffle about like what people want to see from the Vanguard is like us on the ground, like talking to real people about their opinions, is that always turns out to not be true. So Gavin and I put in a massive amount of time commitment, a lot of finances into it. We spend a lot of time on these things, and then it gets like 2,000 views, which is not a sustainable return on investment. So if you're only watching the Vanguard because you think that we are going to be on the ground all the time, that our show is mostly modeled in the studio at this point with exciting, fun things where we see an opportunity to go out and cover it. But I mean, Gavin and I are happy to identify as podcasters, and we do. We don't necessarily identify as like on the ground status quo style journalists, which is why we like to bring on people like Jordan Cheriton to kind of assume that role. Because while we did initially conceive the Vanguard years ago as me and Gavin going on the ground and doing all these tours and having a great merry time of it, we hit a pandemic. We started interviewing people as a podcast, right? Starting with Brent Welder and Corey Bush and Howie Hawkins and the likes of those people. And then we've sort of managed to realize that we get more traction. We have more of a reach when we are putting out studio-based content. Whereas the second that you see a thumbnail from the Vanguard where it's not studio-based content, it overwhelmingly tanks. Like, we had our hopes up so high for this Tent City documentary that Gavin and I made, and I thought it was awesome. Shout out to Ryan Sorrell, who does a great job in that video as the anchor. He was the guy that founded the Casey Defender, which was the one that broke the news story about the Kansas City serial killer that the Star tried to squash. So we've tried to do work like this on the ground. And again, there are people who are doing really good on the ground work 24/7, 365 that you guys should follow. But Gavin and I are really suited to do play-by-play, and the other stuff is what we consider to be more of like just bonus material, like stuff that we would love to do and like to do, but doesn't really get enough traction for it to be the bread and butter of the show. So if there's like a transparency issue there, I thought we'd pretty bit clear about that, but that's kind of more the model of our show. Is like a few times a year we're trying to get out van content, and then the rest of the time will be us in the studio.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, it's just not really financially realistic for us to be producing that kind of content at the rate that we would like to. We'd love to be out in the van all the time, on the road, interviewing people and stuff, but it's so costly to do that. And it's not like Zach and I have a ton of money, like we're a small podcast.
Also, I'm a bartender, so I have to take time off of work. Like,
exactly. We have pets, like, as much as we would love to do that. And I'm not saying we won't, we are going to continue making documentaries, just not at the pace some people would like us to. So we do have documentaries that are coming soon. But unfortunately, it's just not financially viable for us to be constantly doing expeditions. That shit's so costly. Traveling is incredibly expensive, especially in a van with that requires diesel fuel. Like, it's unfortunately not as realistic as we wish it was. So if anyone, wants to send us a PayPal donation of like $10,000, then maybe we can talk, but link in the description, FYI.
More than that, I would just like to say 10,000 people go watch one of the documentaries that we already did make. Like, when we already drove to Minnesota, when we interviewed the former governor that ran as a third party candidate and sat with him in his living room and talked to him for hours and got a bunch of great material from the guy. And then, it was nothing compared to Force the Vote or, Cenk Malds. And, it's just like, all right, like, if that's what you guys are into, that's what you guys are into. Like, we're happy to, cater to what you guys are down to. And I don't think that there's anything wrong with just making entertainment content for you guys. Although it's not what we had initially conceived the Vanguard as being. We found a community of people that like to bullshit with us, that we like to chat with. And that's kind of, how we've tried to do the balancing act of our show, is trying to do both of those things. Gavin and I had 500,000 subs and a fat ass budget and, could afford things like health insurance and, fucking hotels and stuff to travel on and whatnot. Like, we would be way more ambitious. But there's a reason that even people like TYT and Jimmy Dore are reticent to go out and do on the ground content. It's because unless it's satire, people don't really like to click on it. So, unless we were going to go rip off Channel 5, which does hilarious on the ground content. Like, it's
also, did you see that the dude from Channel 5, like, some people have been accusing him of creepy behavior, or like sexually inappropriate behavior or something like that?
No, that's such a bummer, because I actually really like Channel 5. That dude's fucking hilarious.
I know. I was on Reddit this morning and I saw someone posting about it, and I think it was like the Vosh subreddit or something. And I don't think it's been like he hasn't been like found guilty or anything, but there's been some like people on TikTok saying that they had some negative experiences with it, which is a real bummer because I love their work too. Hopefully it's not true. We'll have to wait and see on that, but yeah, real bummer if true.
Yeah, I hope that's not true. But yeah. Absolutely. Shout out to you, Jay Bird D, and yeah, appreciate the super chats and the questions. But yeah, we do have a couple of docs out if you want to check them out. Be interested to get your feedback on that.
Absolutely. And shout out to you, Jay Bird D. Really appreciate the 2 generous $20 super chats. And yeah, check out those docs if you want to. and there will be more coming soon. This might not be as ambitious as what we originally planned to do. It's tough out there in this economy. But yeah, shout out to you, Jay Bird D. Really appreciate that, man. The Twitter beef or the Brazilian coup attempt?
Let's start with Twitter beef, and then we'll round out with the coup attempt.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Yeah. So a little bit more discourse surrounding the recent force the vote debate. We got Glenn Greenwald over here on Twitter. He says, in 2020, House progressives and the incredibly radical squad had the same opportunity as House conservatives had. And that is 100% correct. House conservatives defied leadership to get major concessions to empower them and their agenda. House progressives did what they were told and got nothing. And he's quote tweeting Shama Sawant, who says, it's deeply unfortunate that it was the right wing who've shown how to fight for something in Congress. The squad, also the Progressive Caucus, headed by Pramila Jayapal, have utterly failed, refused to use their leverage to stand up to dim establishment and win any gains for working people, which is basically exactly what we said on the show the other day. Damn, it's a real bummer. It's really frustrating to watch the fascist right wing take these techniques and these strategies in order to resist leadership and to get some concessions from leadership before the so-called left flank ever did. Anyway, before we move on to the part where he calls out Sam Seder, did you have any comment on this, Zach?
I mean, I have no disagreement with this. I agree with Shama's framework that it's deeply unfortunate that it was the right wing, right? I think that the things that they have asked for, and funny enough, Crystal Ball actually had a great radar about this morning, about how the things that Matt Gaetz and however many other voters, it was like Lauren Boebert, but there were some other people that were really concerned about the debt ceiling and all that kind of stuff, and like making sure Kevin McCarthy vowed that he wouldn't let the fucking debt ceiling be raised under his speakership and all kinds of wackadoodle concerns like that. It was all like making the rich richer. I think that Crystal borrowed the phrase from Martin Luther King, where it was going to be a continuation of socialism for the rich and rugged individualism for the poor. That was what they used their leverage to extract, things that will make working people's lives worse, and their lobbyists and the aristocracy richer and more comfortable than they already are. Which is inconceivably comfortable, right? So the fact that they were doing this and it looks like, wow, they actually, used their leverage and they actually fought for something. Like everything they fought for fucking sucked. So
Right.
Wouldn't it have been so much more exciting if they had fought for something real like the squad could have? Absolutely. So yeah, I 100% agree with the sentiment here.
Yeah, absolutely. And then he goes on to say, he quote tweets Brianna Joy Gray, who's saying the argument that the squad would have forced the vote if Jimmy Dore had sent her a better ask is an embarrassing admission that the squad chose to outsource their political strategy to a podcaster instead of leveraging their votes to do literally anything they wanted, which is exactly the point I made on stream the other day. I said that, it would have been one thing if it had said, hey, we see what you guys are saying. We see what you guys are asking for. We're not going to do it for Medicare for all, but we're going to do it for $15 an hour minimum wage because we think it has a higher chance of passing. That would have been one thing. And I think that most people, including most of the force the vote advocates, would have given them all the credit in the world. Really, what it was about was not the floor vote necessarily. That was a big part of it. But really what it was about was just begging these representatives to actually resist leadership, to hold up Nancy Pelosi's speakership coronation in exchange for something, to get something out of the deal. So whether that was, again, $15 minimum wage or something else, specific committee appointments, various ideas were floated by people like Brianna Joy Gray and David Sirota and others. I think that, yeah, even if the squad didn't want to do the forcing the vote of Medicare for all, they could have done literally anything else using the same strategy, and people would have been happy. People would have given them credit. It would have actually felt like they were fighting for us. Instead, they were just like, nope. We're not going to do shit. We're just going to vote for Pelosi and fall in line and do what we're told. So Brianna is 100% correct here. Like I said, this is exactly the point I made on stream the other day. And Glenn Greenwald quote tweets that and says, the reason the squad and House progressives never defy Pelosi or anyone else is because they have a pathetic partisan media. The Young Turks and Sam Seder, who defend their harmlessness and venerate partisan subservience. And then he, quote tweets Brianna Joy Gray. Like I said, what's your reaction to that, Zach?
Yeah, I mean, I just think it's tough, right? Because even the the Young Turks have started to go back and forth on criticizing the squad. It's really interesting. The dynamics of all of this kind of take parsing out, because I think that the squad has been so feckless and so just pathetically poor in their performance of bringing these progressive policies even to the media, if not the actual like halls of Congress, right? Like they're not even using their platforms to really move the needle at all. I mean, we saw the needle for Medicare for All move massively in 2016, just 1 year with Bernie Sanders using the media, right? And admittedly, that was the presidential election year. Again, 2018, a midterm year, we saw the needle move again, way even further, right? So they could have been doing a lot more from that standpoint. And it's true that we've reacted to even Cenk and Anna saying that they're done with the squad. Like they won't even lift a finger for the working people and all that jazz. And I've seen Sam criticize the squad too. What it does always seem like it comes back to is with Force the Vote, particularly, just if you have bad blood with Jimmy Dore and your name isn't the Vanguard, you will not fuck with this concept, right? And to be fair, Crystal and Kyle, I'm sure, aren't hugging it out with Jimmy anytime soon, and they also supported Force the Vote. But it's just like there was a big derangement here, right? Where it was like your own feelings towards Jimmy Dore really got in the way. So I don't know if it's, I mean, I'm sure part of it is the partisan media, where like, if Sam is getting access to AOC still with any regularity, I don't know about that. I haven't seen her go on the Majority Report in a long time. And I also haven't seen AOC ever go on the Young Turks since I've been following it. Maybe she did back in 2018. She probably did. Jesus Christ, it sounds like I'm getting fucking, like I'm in London in World War II. Yeah, Gavin and I live by an airport, so sometimes ginormous ass planes fly over our apartment. Anyway, sorry. But so I kind of agree with Glenn here. It's probably something to do with that, but I also just think it's just like bullshit personality politics over here. Like, I hate this guy and he's really into this and all that. So now I'm not supporting it. And it's literally that petty and it's that high school. And I think that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, absolutely. 100%. Also, shout out to you, Greg. Really appreciate that super generous $25 super chat. Thank you so much. Left and like hearing views from smart, I'm sure you're, if not more intelligent. But yeah, and you said great show. Well, thank you so much, Greg. Really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to you, Greg. Always appreciate somebody chiming in to say something nice about the show, and really appreciate that generous donation. Really appreciate you, and glad that you're enjoying the show. Like I said, we're not the smartest guys, but we try our best.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Really glad to hear that you're enjoying the content, man. That's really generous of you. And shout out to you, Brian, for the $4.99. Sam Seder has had Omar and AOC on his show. He cannot criticize them or challenge their tactics because he needs access like Ryan Grimm. Yeah, he has had them on his show, not in at least a couple years, I don't think, but yeah, I mean, I definitely think there's an element of access journalism going on there for sure. Appreciate the super chat, Brian.
I also think part of it is the fact that, you have an audience of people where it's like, okay, you tell them to be massively critical of the squad and you are massively critical of the squad. I think, it's like, okay, well, didn't you guys tell us to support them? There might be like some reticence there, like, especially when it comes to the Young Turks network, that they built their entire relevance in the Bernie era and that they don't want to abandon that because they have nowhere else to go besides just being like diet MSNBC. And they tried doing that. They tried focusing on Russiagate and Trump and cashing in on that. And I think it's just eroded their network to where like this is like the last thread that they can hold on to keep any young people clicking. And again, I'm not as familiar with the Majority Report. I don't like follow it for work like I do the Young Turks necessarily. We more react to Sam's clips like when something goes viral. Right.
But shout out to you, Brian. Really appreciate that. And we did get a response also from Sam Seder to this tweet from Glenn.
Oh, I thought you meant he sent us a message. I was like, what?
Oh. Heard you guys talking shit. You want to fight? No.
Like, get him on in here.
Sam Seder responds to Glenn's tweet. Again, this is the tweet we just read. And he says, the flamboyant claim that my tiny YouTube show has the vast power to make national elected figures feel completely shielded from large swaths of public opinion is flattering, but probably a function of a brain hemorrhage or a recently minted massive hack with a gullible audience. Damn. Sam Seder chose violence. Holy shit. So what I will say is that Sam Seder was 100% incorrect about Force the Vote. He revealed that multiple times. He completely was exposed in a debate with Brianna Joy Gray that Zach and I covered at the time, where he revealed his, just undeniable ignorance on the subject matter and literally just lied about what might happen or was just too ignorant to know otherwise, suggesting that if the squad pursued the force the vote strategy and voted against Nancy Pelosi, then that would somehow result in Republican Kevin McCarthy becoming speaker instead, which never was going to happen. And whether or not he was lying or was just too ignorant to know otherwise is debatable. But the reality of the situation is that Sam Seder was completely incorrect about force the vote. And I do think it's fair to say that his Jimmy Dore derangement syndrome prevented him from, acknowledging what was very obviously a quality strategy and what was very obviously the correct positioning that the squad should have taken in relation to Democratic Party leadership, specifically Nancy Pelosi, who is no friend of the progressive movement and who is quite literally an enemy of the priorities of progressives like AOC and Ilhan Omar, at least the progressives the priorities that they pretend to have, such as Medicare for all, et cetera, et cetera. So, Sam was totally and completely wrong about that. We called it out at the time. We've called it out since. And that is what it is. But I will say that I do think he's fair. I do think it's fair for him to say that, like, blaming his commentary and his disagreement with Jimmy Dore, blaming him for the reason the squad acted the way they did, I don't think that's quite fair. I think AOC and the squad at large were more afraid of just, they're careerists, right? They want positive attention from the liberal media, not specifically the Majority Report, but just the liberal media at large, MSNBC, the New Yorker, the New York Times, all of these outlets. They want positive attention from those people. They want to continue to escalate the, career ladder. They want to make good connections and have good relations with their fellow members of the Democratic caucus. And I think that those kind of careerist reasons are more so the reason why they ultimately did not force the vote, just because it would have been awkward and uncomfortable for them. And they're not really fighters at the end of the day. They don't really have any interest in resisting corporate Democrats other than, just as a branding exercise. Like, they want to pretend to be more progressive than other Democrats in Congress. And in some ways they are. But when push comes to shove, they're not actually going to resist. They're not actually going to fight back. They just want to be progressive enough to kind of have that edgy brand of being progressive without actually doing anything about it, without actually fighting for the policies they pretend to support. So again, I think it has more to do with that than the fact that Sam Seder and TYT were running cover for them, which they were. So I think it's fair to blame I think it's fair to criticize Sam Seder and TYT for their coverage of Force the Vote and for being completely and utterly wrong about the substance. But would I blame them for the reason why the squad ultimately acted the way they did? Not necessarily. I think that Sam's correct that his small show, it's not small, but his show does not necessarily have the vast power to shield public officials from large swaths of public opinion. I think that's ultimately correct.
Yeah, so I think that there's two ways to look at that. One is the Majority Report, the Joe Rogan experience. No. Do I think that Joe Rogan has the power to protect somebody from political? I mean, in a vague sense, sure. Like, he can promote them, he can help them fundraise, like, if he wanted to. Like, who's that one guy with one eye that he likes to have on every once in a while? Dan Crenshaw.
Yeah. Dan Cringe-Shaw.
Yeah, Cringe-Shaw, the Cringe Meister, of course. But so yeah, I'm sure that boosted that guy's career and the fact that there are a bunch of Joe Rogan stands out there. But I think what makes it a little bit different from a show like that to a show like Sam Seder's is Sam's show. I mean, they talk about other things, but by and large, the framework is politics. So his listeners, and particularly his most ardent listeners, right? Like, let's say there's 50 to 100,000 of them, of the people who like I know he has 1 million subs, but it's tough to usually don't get like the actual turnout on your videos of like what your sub count is. It's usually low if you have a fuck ton of a fuck ton of subscribers, just because you have to deal with like old accounts, people that aren't using them anymore, et cetera, et cetera. But anyway, let's say that there's like 100,000 people that are like ardent fucking Majority Report listeners, or for argument's sake, those people are going to most likely be people who are sending donations to the squad, right? Way more likely than if I just took a random sampling of individuals. If I sample majority report listeners, or of course TYT listeners, let's assume they're the same size for argument, right? So if I take a sample size of an actual general population, or even just like people who watch a show that is not politically themed, and then versus a sample of people who are in Sam Seder's or TYT's audience, you're obviously going to be having a much more progressive sample. So it is true that by convincing those people who are the most ardent supporters of a certain politician, right, the people who are going to be most loyal, most likely to knock, most likely to volunteer their time or send a donation or phone bank or do something, so I do think it has a little more value than maybe Sam is portraying it as, because you focus on like a niche issue like progressive politics. It's not like we have a ton of people that listen to this all the time and a ton of people that donate to AOC all the time. If you're dealing with like percentages, I think it's a pretty concentrated amount of those people do listen to shows like TYT and the majority report. But of course you can't lay the responsibility there. I just think it's one element of many, which by and large, Gavin already pointed out, which is just the fact that it was their own comfort and their own, in desire to be mocked by their fellow, representatives. They didn't want to be outsiders. They wanted to be insiders. And so that was the choice that they made. And you said something that reminded me a little bit of what Chris Hedges was talking about, which is that this was all just like a revolution of marketing. Like it was all revolution in marketing only. And it's one of those reasons why we always like to draw the parallel on this show between what's happened to AOC and the squad and what happened to the Obamas, right? Or Obama, not the Obamas, but the Obama administration, right? The idea that, he ran on being a really vocal, ardent progressive, like it rhetorically, right? Like obviously, if you look at where the money was coming from, that was never real. Like he was raking in more Wall Street money than John McCain. All these kinds of things, the hope and change, and yes, we can, and all that kind of shit was like it was just marketing. But he was speaking to a much more progressive value set than he would actually go on to govern as by a wide margin. And that's what's essentially happened with the squad. They've ran on this, Bernie crap progressivism, and now they're just, peddling, corporate neoliberalism.
Right. That's exactly correct. And like I said, I think it's 100% fair game to criticize Sam Seder and TYT for the substance of their arguments. Or rather the lack of substance of their arguments, and the fact that they were not just wrong, but inaccurate when they were discussing force the vote and what it might lead to. But again, I do hesitate to put the blame at any one commentator or YouTube channel's feet for the failings of politicians who at this point, I don't even think that AOC and the squad, I don't think they give a fuck about what anyone in progressive media is saying. They're so far beyond that at this point. I genuinely think people like AOC, they care more about what the folks on MSNBC are saying than fucking Sam Seder or Kyle Kulinski or fucking Crystal Ball or anyone like that. They clearly don't give a shit, which is why they never come on our shows. And I guess that AOC did go on the Majority Report like 2 years ago, and maybe Ilhan Omar went on the Majority Report like a year ago. But the point is that these shows they barely have access to them either. TYT is not, it doesn't have on AOC. They haven't had her on in years. I really, truly don't think that the squad members give a single fuck about what people in the progressive YouTube scene are talking about, what they're saying. So to think that they were just like watching Majority Report videos and crafting their, policy and strategy decisions based on that, I think I wouldn't go that far. I think it has a lot more to do with careerism and the fact that they wanted to keep ascending the ladder of the Democratic Party and of their careerist ambitions. So yeah, that would be my disagreement with Glenn Greenwald. Although don't get me wrong, it's still 100% valid to criticize and to point out the issues with Sam's coverage and of Cenk and Anna's coverage of the Force the Vote movement, because it was, complete bullshit.
Retweet, 100%. Sign off on that.
100%.
Man, I wonder how much longer the Force the Vote faucet is going to leak. I mean, it was funny. Ben Burgess and the Vanguard, we've come down on different sides of this repeatedly, right? But I like Ben Burgess. I think he's a nice guy. He's sharing his perspective. We're sharing ours. And he did tweet something kind of funny where he said that he's now sure that his children will never live to see the end of the Force the Vote discord on the internet because of what happened in January of 2021. But he is now hoping and pretty certain that his grandchildren might. And I was like, that's hilarious. That's pretty funny. I was like, all right, I'll give you that one, Ben. That was a good joke.
Yeah, that is pretty funny. Also, shout out to you, Nasser, once again for the $4.99. Love Glenn's past work, but all of his good takes now are framed in the terms of media is liberal and bad, with zero criticism of the right. Sad. Yeah, I mean, there's no denying that Glenn Greenwald's kind of shifted his politics more so to the right. He associates with people more on the right. He's more frequently critical of people on the left than he is of people on the right. That's no secret. So yeah, I can't really disagree with you there, man. We still enjoy chatting with Glenn and debating Glenn, and I think he's a nice guy. I obviously have massive amounts of respect for the work he's done journalistically. But yeah, I do think it's fair to say what you're saying.
Yeah, look, I mean, I think that he's decided that that's more of his priority, right? It's the taking on the liberal media establishment. With I get it. That's frustrating as hell. Fuck the New York Times. Like, they are elitist pieces of shit. Like, he's not wrong when he says that. But yeah, you're right. It's different than the kind of, I don't know, journalistic focus that he was having and working on in the past, right? Mostly focusing on the security state and not so much talking about media, where it's like, obviously he's still deeply concerned about the security state, and whenever he does do reporting on that, it's usually excellent. But it's just now it's a majority of talking about like the liberal media apparatus that he's taken massive issue with.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's fair to say. So thank you so much for the super chat, Nasser. And yeah, one thing I always say about Glenn, though, despite our disagreements, is he's always willing to hash out the beef. He's always willing to confront his critics and explain his point of view, us included. We've had multiple exchanges live on air with Glenn about our areas of disagreement, and you can't say that about everyone. So I do always appreciate that about the guy. And of course, he's always welcome on the Vanguard if he wants to hash out our other disagreements which may have emerged, or to talk about the various areas of agreement which we still have. Either way, thanks so much for the super chat.
And
man.
I would say the same thing about Sam. Sam's also really great, always been gracious to us, was kind when came on our show, debated us in a heated manner, but was cool about it. So hey, shout out to the both of them. Well, both different sides of that aisle, but the both were cool enough to on multiple occasions with Glenn come on and chat with us, which is all you can ask for from people.
Straight up. Also, if anyone hasn't seen it, make sure to check out Glenn Greenwald's debate with Sam Seder from several years ago. I think they were talking about Russiagate. That was a pretty spicy debate. So check that out if you guys haven't seen it. It was pretty entertaining. But really appreciate the super chat. And thank you so much, Alex, for the $2. Busy AF, but glad I'm able to catch you guys live. Well, thanks so much for tuning in, Alex. We really appreciate hearing from you as always. Glad that you're taking the time out of your day to catch us live, even though you're busy. That means a lot, man.
Yeah, shout out to you, Alex. Always good to hear from you. Shout out to you, Victor, for the $4.99. Really appreciate that generous super chat. Progressives would be a ton more popular if they realized that the workers hate CNN and MSNBC. The only popular thing Trump did was piss off MSM journals. 100%. That is true. When Trump ran for president, he ran against the mainstream media. He wasn't just running against Hillary Clinton. He was running against the status quo. He was running against the entire, liberal media apparatus, that we were just discussing when we were talking about Glenn's criticism. That's what he ran against. That's what he framed every issue as. And that's how he was able to fucking wriggle his way out of every controversy. Fake news, the hoax, folks. It's a hoax, folks. It's Russiagate. The liberal media, the swamp, all kinds of shit. Whatever he would call it, water off a duck's back, anything that they wrote about the guy. And it was genius. It was 100% genius, because you're absolutely right, Victor. The only popular thing he did was go after the media, and he did so with shocking success.
Yeah. 100%, Victor. That's spot on. And I think the problem for progressives is that to get elected, they need the support of the Democratic Party base. And the problem with winning a primary in the Democratic Party and being anti-establishment and anti-establishment media is the fact that, unfortunately, a lot of the voters in the Democratic primary, they still actually do like the mainstream media. They do watch CNN. And they are more attached to the establishment than a lot of the voters in a Republican primary. So what Trump was able to do was uniquely possible because of the persuasion of those right-wing voters in the Republican Party base. That's why Bernie Sanders had to, or at least in his mind, had to kind of put on the kid's gloves when he was talking about Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, and when he was engaging with the mainstream media, because unfortunately, in the Democratic Party voter base, they have a lot more respect for those institutions than people on the right wing. And there's various reasons why, but that does seem to be the way it is, which is why it's harder to be a successful electorally if you're running as like a scorched earth anti-establishment progressive.
Oh yeah, and I mean, I think that has to change if the progressives are ever going to win. Like we have to make liberals respect the pageantry way less, and the people who are liberals need to become Bernie-crats as we shift the tides a little further. Then it's like you have ardent leftists, and then it's like you're actually just working with Bernie-crats at this point, because those people can be, bifurcated into which side of the class war they're going to fall down on. And not to call it like a class war and be incendiary, but like which side of the class divide, right? Which side of the us versus them are you going to go on? Are you going to be like, yeah, I'll pay my taxes and make sure that these single moms don't starve? Or I need every crumb and penny of mine. Fuck you, I'm voting Republican. Let's break it up. Let's see. Are you, which part of Virginia are you? Are you the working class, strong spirit, union coal miner Virginia, or are you the suburban outer DC kind of Virginia? Let's bifurcate those, and then we have a real working mass of people. And that's what Bernie Sanders fucking did, guys, in 2016 when he had his shit together. Okay, there were a bunch of people that, what did they do? They ran off and voted for Trump instead of Bernie Sanders. They supported Bernie Sanders in the primary, then they had nobody to vote for because they weren't going to vote for Hillary Clinton. They weren't going to vote for the status quo. Those are the people that we can reach. Those are the people that we can convert. And before you turn your nose up at them, like, we can't win without them. So it's either like, let's have some poor people who we know aren't going to turn their backs on the cause, or let's have some aristocracy that know how to like fucking talk out of both sides of their mouth and pretend to be nice. You know what I mean?
100%. Thank you so much, Victor. Really appreciate the $4.99. Also, thank you so much, David Ho, for the $9.99. That's really generous of you, David. Thank you so much for tuning in. Really appreciate the super chat.
Yeah, I can't tell if that's your profile picture or if I'm just reflashing from all that acid I ate when I was 15. But
that's funny. Yeah, that's a good profile pic, David. Appreciate it. Thank you so much, Alex, also for the $5. And by the way, guys, we're about to get into the failed coup attempt in Brazil. So sit tight. That's really gonna be some juicy stuff to go over. But shout out to you, Alex. Really appreciate the $5. I only go to Sam and TYT for dunking on right wingers. Largely, I agree with you, Alex. I totally agree with you. When it comes to the low-hanging fruit of just shitting on Trump or DeSantis or Ted Cruz, stuff like that. Yeah, obviously Sam Seder and Cenk Uygur and all the folks at TYT, that's the role they fill, and they do their job well when it comes to that stuff. Again, it's low-hanging fruit, but do I still find some enjoyment in it? Absolutely. Of course I do. The right wing is easy to make fun of, and they should be made fun of. They're fucking moronic imbeciles. So yeah, that's the stuff they do best. When it comes to Sam Seder and TYT's commentary on the progressive movement itself at this point, yeah, I do find it to be less valuable.
Yeah, and look, I mean, when I first found out about the Majority Report, years ago, probably like circa 2018-ish was when I started tuning into that a lot because of the Michael Brooks show era. I don't know if those dates are correct, but something like that, right around that time period. And then I actually really liked Sam's videos of him like dunking on like libertarian callers. Like he would take like phone calls from regular people that were just like deranged libertarians and really destroy them. And honestly, he was pretty good at it. Those were fucking hilarious.
Oh, yeah.
And if you're ever like, how did Sam get big in the scene? Like, go watch that shit, because you'll be like, oh my God, this is actually like, you will audibly laugh. Like, it's funny.
Yeah.
So I still like that shit whenever it comes across. It'll be like, Sam destroys like deranged anarcho-capitalists. And I'll be like, oh yeah, I will listen to Sam destroy that guy, because of course he will.
Absolutely. I totally agree with you, Alex. And thank you so much, Mike H, for the $5. A problem with many left-wing commentators is that they are always negative and unrelatable a lot of the time. Thank you guys for not being uptight pricks. Well, thank you, Mike, for the compliment. We really appreciate that. And yeah, Zach and I try to be positive. We try to be relatable. We try to be ourselves, and we don't try to act like we're better than everyone. We're not better than anyone. We're not smarter than anyone. We're just two guys from Kansas City who happen to have a lot of opinions. And despite our loud mouths, yeah, we try to show grace, and we try to, understand people and interpret their arguments in good faith and engage with criticism and all that stuff. So we really appreciate you, Mike. Thank you so much for the super chat, and thank you so much for being a loyal viewer.
Yeah, good to see you in the chat. I don't know if you've been watching and I just haven't noticed you, but always good to see you. You've been missing out on the sport.
Oh no, looks like Zach was disappeared. Not sure what's going on there. Zach.
The CIA
Hello.
took me out. Right as I was about to get hit my stride with Mike H over here. They did not want me to tell him. They did not want me to wax about the number 1 seed in the AFC, finishing regular season number 1, first round bye. Fuck yeah, baby. But yeah, other than that, I mean, it was a really tragic way for us to get the first round bye. I would much rather have seen, DeMar Hamlin be healthy and survive through the day. But anyway, shout out to, he returned home to Buffalo today. That's why unfortunately the Chiefs got the number 1 seed. I mean, if the Bengals had won that game like straight up, I would have been stoked, and then I'd be like, yeah, fuck yeah, number 1. But it was a little bit of a bittersweet moment because you're like, well, this is kind of a fucked way to get the first round bye. But anyway, good to see you, Mike H. Really appreciate you tuning in. I like it when I can see some people in here that are big sports guard guys. The few and the proud. Just kidding. But anyway, yeah, we try not to be uptight pricks. We try and talk about whatever the fuck we want to, and we try not to take anything too much to heart when other people are mean to us, because we've said our own fair share of insults as well.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I don't give a fuck what people say about the Vanguard. You're more than welcome to criticize us and mock us and all that stuff. It's your prerogative. Anyway, shout out to you, Mike. Really do appreciate that. And thank you so much, Nikki, for the $4.99. Just popping in to say thanks. I don't get to see your live stream often, but y'all give me hope. Well, thank you so much, Nikki. So much positivity today from chat. We really appreciate that. We appreciate you being a loyal viewer as well, and for the kind super chat and the nice words. It means a lot.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Shout out to you, Nikki. Always great to see the regulars of the Vanguard community, right? Like that's what's cool and insular about this is it's like I get, when I was a kid, when I was like 18, I watched the Pump Up the Volume with Christian Slater, and I remember kicking myself, and I was like, fuck, man, when I was in high school, I never had an underground pirate radio station. I would have been perfect for that. And I'm like thinking about how my life would have been way more cinematic, and like, wow, all the things that I would have said, I just wrote for the crappy paper that nobody read. I could have been on the radio. And then like 2 years later, Gavin and I were like, fuck it, let's just put ourselves on the radio called the internet. And so it's really always exciting and cool that we have this little underground show with a really niche, tight-knit community of people. Like, it's small enough that I recognize everybody's name when they, chat in here. I know who's like an actual listener and who's disagreeing in good faith and who's somebody that's just trying to rile us up for the most part. So yeah, we love our community here. We love the show, and appreciate you right back. All right, MR and Anti-Force the Vote gave cover to keep them seeming left. I maybe that's true, but I still think it really goes back more to that like high school drama shit where it was like, I don't want to be associated with Jimmy because I don't like him. And it's like, okay, yeah, well, that's fine, but I don't really love Jimmy either. Him and I aren't going out for Negronis together. You know what I mean? Anyway, maybe you're right, Clave Sounds. I just have a slightly different perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a combination of the two to some extent, but I do think that a large part of the reason why the Majority Report folks and the TYT folks disagreed with Force the Vote and were vocal about their disagreements to the extent that they was the association with Jimmy Dore. I don't think there's any goddamn denying that, guys. I really don't think there's any denying that. In fact, it was funny. My girlfriend and I were watching TYT the other night because they were talking about the House Progressives holding up, or sorry, not the House Progressives, but the Freedom Caucus holding up Kevin McCarthy's speakership in order to obtain some concessions. And Cenk was ranting about how if only the progressives had the balls that the Freedom Caucus had, and if only the progressives could employ the same sort of aggressive strategies in order to get some concessions for the left, wouldn't that be great? And I'm like, bro, that's what we were asking for at the time. And you weren't on board with it because of Jimmy Dore and because you hate him more than anyone else. And again, like, we're no fans of fucking Jimmy Dore either. Not a fan of Jimmy Dore. But that doesn't mean we have to be dishonest about strategy and just lie about what's a good strategy and what's not based on personal petty bullshit. We love to talk about drama on the show, and we're often are embroiled in petty personal bullshit, but that doesn't mean we're going to change our fucking substantive political opinions based on that.
Absolutely. So we try and be consistent as best we can. And to be fair, we also have each other out here to be like, fuck you, dude. You did not say that 2 weeks ago. If one of us like changes our mind, then you have to be like, well, this is why I changed my mind. And I saw this. I'll be like, well, fuck you. We agreed last week. Now we disagree, right? Like, we have that kind of argument on our show all the time. That's how we keep each other honest. Like, if not for you guys, for each other, because we argue off air all the time, and we'll both be like, what the fuck about this? And that's what I feel like keeps keeps the show evergreen. You know, just you never know what Gavin and I are gonna what minutia will decide to dispute on any given day. But shout out to you, and shout out to you, Jay Black. After watching your most recent live stream, this working class gay man of color wanted to say he appreciates the good faith criticism of leftist legislators, even though they offered by non-POC commentators quality matters. This is probably a reference into the gentleman. I'm trying really hard to think of his name. Maybe it was Russ
I think
Brandon.
so. Russell
I think
Kent
it
or
was
something.
Yeah, I think it was Russell. Anyway, he was offering some skepticism about why so many white commentators are so eager to go after the squad, right? The only not the only, but the primary progressive people of color representing the like broader movement, and why we don't hear them going after as many white progressives, and that's just because there aren't any white progressives worth really talking about besides Bernie Sanders, and I mentioned that he kind of forgets or he gets forgotten because he's old as shit, he's ancient, everybody feels like, okay, we'll just give him the pass because of what he's already done, and then the squad really embodied that like next chapter. We haven't seen that next chapter from them, so I appreciate where Russ is coming from, and I always don't mind being checked, and if I'm saying some sideways shit, then I want to hear about it, but I appreciate your perspective as well, Jay, and we always, I never try and let that, like, obviously, like, I don't fucking know what my like blind spots are, but we try and be really down the middle when it comes to that shit. I've never been like, I don't know. I've always tried to be like, straight on that. I hope so.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jay. Really, really means a lot. Really appreciate the generous super chat. Yeah, I'm really glad you're enjoying the show. Really glad you're enjoying the good faith criticism of some of these lefties in Congress. Yeah, thank you so much, man.
Shout out to you.
Also, shout out to you, Kevin. Thanks so much for the $2. Upvote for Gavin nerfing the sports guard just now. Yeah, I was like, enough is enough. Okay, we're shutting this down.
Just wait till there's some more shit to talk about. We're gonna be going sports guard 24/7. I'll call it the what's it called? The ESVN, the Entertainment Sports Vanguard Network or something like that.
Yeah. No offense to Emma, but I always thought that name was so low effort. Anyway,
it's actually a decent show. Sometimes I'll listen to it. I'll be like, Emma's like she knows, she really does know sports.
Yeah, no, I have no beef with her in that regard. I just think the name is dumb. But again, no offense, just my honest opinion. In relation to this comment from Mike, thanks so much for the $5. Classic example, classic example, Zach. Leftists hate sports because it's bread and circus to appease people or something like that. People like that are annoying. 100% they're annoying as fuck. If that's your opinion, it's fine. You're welcome in our community. I'm not, whatever. But I feel this way about all entertainment. Like, Zach and I are also really into movies. Sometimes we'll chat about movies on the show and our favorite films of the year and stuff like that. And people are like, why are you talking about this? Like, well, people are dying on the streets. And I'm like, because we want to have a fucking relatable show that normies can tune into and enjoy and hopefully, learn from our opinions and absorb some of our radical political takes, but also not be off-put by feeling like all we care about is, lecturing them and talking about the most depressing things going on at any given time. Like, it's okay to be yourself, and it's okay to embrace interests that are outside of politics and activism, whether that's football or cinema or music. Like, yeah, I get it. We live in a society. Like, let's move on. Let's enjoy our lives while we fight for what matters and hopefully move the ball forward in that regard.
Yeah, it's funny though, because you can always fall back on the Chompsmeister, He says the point of sports is it's a way of building up irrational attitudes of submission to authority and group cohesion behind leadership elements. In fact, it's training in irrational jingoism. That's also a feature of competitive sports. And I'm just like, that is how the left will lose forever, bro. That's how you get your pants pulled down and kicked out of the party. Like, that is some nerd shit right there. And it's like, I got a lot of respect for Noam Chomsky, even though he was like super uninterested in us. That guy was unimpressed as all hell by us. We actually pre-wrote out quite whatever you think is utterly irrelevant, Gavin. Like, it's just like, all right, bro, okay, kind of coming across like an asshole, but that's fine. That's your whole shtick at this point.
I was actually rewatching our interview with Noam the other day. It was pretty funny.
He was kind of a dick to us, bro. Like, now that we're like a year and a half removed, I can be like, damn, dog, you were cold as hell. Like, we didn't get like Santa Claus Noam Chomsky. We got like curmudgeon Noam.
To be fair, he is always kind of like that in interviews these days. Like,
I've seen him be nice.
True, but like, I remember he did he did an interview with Matt Taibbi around the same time. And Matt Taibbi started out the interview by basically just lauding him with praise and being like, you are the inspiration behind my new book, Hate Inc. And, obviously Manufacturing Consent was such a, influential text to me. And Noam was just like, thank you. Let's get on with it. Like,
Didn't
I
say
don't
that's
care.
utterly and completely irrelevant.
True. Either way, I mean, I still appreciate the guy for coming on the show. I'd
He's
like
a
to chat with him
legend.
again. He's
for
a
sure.
fucking, he's like the Methuselah of the left. You know what I'm saying? Anyway, appreciate the super chat, Mike. Really do.
Yeah, he cleaned up though. Now you can't call him that anymore. I remember you sent me a picture of him with his beard gone, and now he's like neat and tidy gnome, like night gnome, like ready for I don't know. Anyway, I'm glad that he's still around kicking, but even that was a terrible take about sports, and one of the reasons why the left is deeply unlikable, because even if you believe those things, you have to be smart enough to know that everybody will hate you if you say it like that, and then change how you're getting your message across, being like, yeah, guys, what if we all got as passionate about this, about other things, and that would bring our community together? Like, bark up that tree, and not like, you guys are all dogs being trained in, habitual jingoism and all fucking crazy shit.
And that's such a dumb take too, because like sports have been around forever. Like human beings have always engaged in physical competition of some sort. Going back to like ancient Greece and the Olympics and like all that shit.
Oh yeah, indigenous cultures all over the world.
Exactly. Yeah, so I always thought that was ridiculous. It's not like sports is necessarily a function of capitalism, and unfortunately capitalism has in many ways perverted the true spirit of physical competition. But to say that it's a product of it is just inaccurate. Human beings have always engaged in that sort of physical competition. It builds camaraderie. It's obviously just an expression of pure physical athleticism, and there's nothing wrong with that. It's not like I just think that's a ridiculous take.
Yep, absolutely. And I just realized Noam Chomsky is so old, his generation was considered old and out of touch by boomers when they were young. Yeah, this guy was writing about World War II, like in the publishing things about like his thoughts on the 30s when he was like a 13-year-old kid. In like 1939, he's like, oh, I think we really need to be doing a better job of keeping an eye on what's happening in Europe. And it's like, what is going on? And then he'll be able to, I remember I published this, and it'll be like 1942, and you're like, oh my God, you were born in the 1920s. This is like insane. You will be 100 before this decade is over. Like, that is absurd.
Yeah, he actually just turned 94. So it's pretty crazy. And again, that's why I do totally forgive his curmudgeonly attitude when engaging with us kids. He's 94 years old, right? And it is pretty impressive that he's still out here doing interviews and writing books and all that stuff at that advanced age. So yeah, shout out to Noam Chomsky. Don't agree with the guy on everything, but he's still a legend. And shout out to you, Connor Linker. Really appreciate the generous $20 super chat. Thank you so much, man. That's really, really appreciative. Very supportive.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I mean, shout out to Noam for making it this long. Lord knows I won't be doing anything when I'm 94, and I won't be doing anything for probably many, many, many years before that. I doubt that many people will live to see the 94 ripe old age with climate change looming the way it is. But who knows? Who knows? Maybe we'll all just terraform Mars and be just fine. That's what Elon's told me, so I'm happy with that. And shout out to you, Nikki O'Brien. Folks like Noam and Bernie have probably earned the right to be curmudgeonly, but still don't be rude. Y'all are always fair. Oh yeah, and I'm mostly just kidding, right? Like I'm just like teasing everybody. Like it was so we were so honored to interview the guy, and the way he is just so terse and straightforward and direct, and he doesn't give a single fuck what you have to say, and he does it in a way that it's like, well, you are a genius and you are like 92 years old, so it's like, what the fuck do you have to give me a respect for? So I don't care. Like, I didn't take it personally or anything. I just think it's good fodder for a joke when we bring up the pod. It's kind of like Gavin's guzzling of the Coca-Cola during that whole charade. It was just a lovely piece of Vanguard history.
Also, I rewatched that interview, and I don't think it's quite fair to say I was guzzling it. I was sipping the Coca-Cola. I like how that story has evolved over time.
Now, Mr. Noam Chomsky, professor.
Definitely an iconic moment in Vanguard history, no doubt about it. And shout out to you, Nikki. Yeah, I mean, the same goes for Bernie. The dude definitely has that curmudgeonly streak. Like, my aunt is a political science professor, recently was visiting in town for the holidays, right? And she was telling me about she was taking some of her students. She lives in New York and teaches college, political science, whatever. And they were doing it was like during 2016 or 2020. I don't remember if it was 2016 or 2020, but she took some students who were like hardcore Bernie fans to a Bernie rally. And there was like specifically a couple young women that were students in her class that were really into Bernie Sanders, and they like really wanted to get a picture with him and stuff. And Bernie was like doing his, shaking hands with the supporters and getting pictures taken and all that stuff, and they were at the end of the line, and by the time they got there, she was like, hey, do you mind taking this photo of these young supporters of yours? And Bernie was just like, make it quick, stuff like that. So it is definitely probably part of the fact that they're older guys, and that's okay. I mean, who really cares, right? No one I'm not concerned about someone's attitude or their mood or whatever. All I care about is what you support and your ideas. But either way, thank you so much, Nikki. Really appreciate that. And thank you so much, Jay Flow Grappling Academy. Really appreciate that, man. Generous $4.99 super chat. Being criticized by boomers from the right should be considered a badge of honor, in my opinion. Yeah, I mean, I think that there's a lot of awesome boomers out there, but there definitely is that mentality which is often associated with them, which is kind of anti-progressive and resistant to change. And again, not all boomers, but some boomers for sure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And as we always say, boomer is a state of mind, right? So anybody can embody that boomerism. But shout out to you, JFLO Grappling Academy. A lot of wild shit going down in the UFC right now. I'm imagining that you're paying attention to that. This, Dana White shit was ugly. But anyway, shout out to you, JFLO.
Yeah, thanks so much. And also shout out to you, Kelly, for the $4.99. Watching everything unfold in Brazil live gave me the same sense of terror as January 6th. This is what happens when insurrection is normalized. I mean, yeah, I do think it's fair to say that the attempted insurrection in Brazil is very much so inspired by or a result of the behavior of Donald Trump and his supporters in the wake of his loss to Joe Biden. So it is fair to say that it's quite terrifying that sort of anti-democratic insurrectionist behavior has been normalized to the extent it has, not just domestically but internationally. That being said, luckily both failed miserably, embarrassingly so. And also, it reminds me of a tweet. They don't talk enough about how funny January 6th actually was. And sure, it was scary in the sense that it was a big threat to democracy and what it represented. But then we also had some moments like this that you just can't help but laugh at.
The Zelda sound is what's perfect. Like it makes the sound look when Link gets hurt. It's like, oh, that was a good one. Also, just the QAnon shaman and all that shit. Like it was a joke. That's why I didn't. I came out with the unpopular opinion that I was just not concerned at all, and that I was just like, this is fucking like stranger than fiction. Like this shit was wild. And then to Brazil's credit, they closed it down even faster than we did in the United States. And they rounded up those motherfuckers who will be now prosecuted, I believe. So yeah, we definitely started the trend here in America, but the Brazilian government acted way more swiftly than our own government did, which is odd because we spend a fucking fortune on security in this country.
Right. That's the real sketchy thing about January 6th is that it was allowed to happen in the first place. That's the real scary thing about it. And yeah, I've always maintained that while it was certainly threatening and certainly not a good day by any stretch of the imagination, I really take issue more with Trump and his cronies and their attempts to steal the election and to subvert democracy. They were the ones that were actually in charge. They were the ones that were actually in power. As far as all these Duck Dynasty looking motherfuckers, all these idiots that were storming the Capitol, for the most part, they're just deeply, deeply ignorant, stupid people that have been brainwashed and propagandized by far-right media and conspiracy theories. And while they're definitely not free of blame, I really take issue with the guys at the top, Donald Trump. And that's what frustrates me when you see these January 6 people being thrown in jail and having the book thrown at them. I'm for that. I think they should face consequences, but only if Trump does too. And the fact that Trump remains a free man as the guy that inspired the insurrection in the first place and that actually tried to behind the scenes steal democracy. We all remember the phone call to the Georgia Secretary of State where it said, find me 7,000 votes or 20,000 votes or whatever. Like, there is no denying the fact that Trump did try to steal that election. He did try to subvert the democratic results of a presidential election, which was completely unprecedented. This is, he's the one that should pay for it, not all of these morons that, were basically just propagandized by right-wing media and that were too stupid to know better. So that's what I would say. But yeah, it is fair that the coup in Brazil, the attempted coup, is directly inspired by what happened on January 6th. And, here's a QAnon copycat, the Brazilian version of the QAnon shaman. So that's one piece of evidence to that effect. And we're about to get into some more in that, or as it relates to this story.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to you, Kelly. And shout out to you, Adi the Bug Catcher. Just dropping by for 10 minutes between work calls, waiting for the documentaries to be out. See, this is what's surprising to me is I didn't realize how many of the actual Vanguard listeners are interested in watching that content, because we can put a move on it and we can get it out for you guys. I always just, in my brain, and I think a little bit in Gavin's brains too, we always kind of assume that what you guys really want is to hear the fucking, gossip from us, the fucking real shit. They're like, oh, we need to get on to talk about X, Y, and Z. Nobody really cares what we have to say about the other shit. But if that's not true, then we can kind of, adjust our priorities. Again, the financial shit is the financial shit, right? It is fucking expensive to do what Jordan Cheriton does, and what the individuals who are out on the road doing that day-to-day grind are on. But we can definitely put more pep in our step on getting some, on the ground content out, even if it's just around Kansas City. If you guys are interested in that, if you guys will watch that. And shout out to you, Adi. I know you're one of the real Vanguardians.
Yeah, shout out to you, Adi. Always appreciate you. Thank you so much for the super chat. And yeah, we're definitely gonna get to work on those docs. We're gonna have a couple for you guys that should be coming out within the next few months. And as far as the financial element, yes, it's definitely a burden, but for some of these documentaries, we don't even have to actually leave the house. We can just interview people remotely, edit it together into a nice video collage, a documentary of sorts. We talked about a vegan documentary, and I would still like to make that. We don't have to go to the fucking, vegan capital of the world to do that. We don't have to go infiltrate a factory farm or something. No, we can just compile footage and interviews and stuff like that and piece together a little video essay or piece for you guys, which is what we plan on doing. So thank you so much, Adi.
And to be honest, that's basically what every Vanguard show is. I mean, it's just Gavin and I sharing our thoughts with the evidence that we find on the internet. And basically every episode of the Vanguard, it might as well be on PBS. I mean, this is educational material that you guys, should feed to your children and the elderly. Ready for see this? I didn't even think about that. I just meant I don't know what I was thinking. Getting ready for the day, shaving it off. He looked really clean and pristine. Actually, the opposite of sickly and ready for the deep sleep. He looked spry in comparison to how we'd seen him during COVID, all hunched over from his compound in Arizona, because that's where it's driest and hottest, which is the best place to be if you're 100, I guess. But anyway, no, I think Gnome's got another decade in him. If I'm betting the over under, I'm taking a decade on Gnome. I think this guy's going to be deep into the 104. He might kiss 105. I mean, that guy is going to be around. It's kind of like how people say every cigarette you smoke takes one day off of your life and gives it to Keith Richards. I think every time a capitalist cries, it takes one day off of their life and gives it to Noam Chomsky.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. Thank you so much, Virtuoso. And shout out to you, Boeing 757 pilot. Really appreciate the generous $20 super chat. As always, love hearing from you, man. Perhaps I'm in the minority, but January 6th didn't upset me. I like the thought of Congress being terrified of the public. My bigger concern is that I wish it was the left storming the building for healthcare. Good show today. I actually had a lengthy argument with my girlfriend on this exact subject matter. Because, yeah, in a sense, I agree with you, right? In a sense, I agree with you. I also like the idea of Congress being terrified of the public. And I also wish that the left had more of that revolutionary spirit and energy where they're not afraid to go, cause a genuine fucking ruckus and actually, be like, no, we're here and we are demanding our fucking rights. Unfortunately, that's not what the people on January 6th were doing. They were there for a completely illegitimate reason. They were there based on the lies of conspiracy theorists and right-wing lunatics like Alex Jones. And what they were demanding of the Congress was basically just to subvert democracy. They weren't demanding any rights. They weren't demanding healthcare or, higher wages or basic human rights or anything like that. They were literally just asking, or they were literally just, threatening members of Congress in order to overturn the legitimate and democratic results of a presidential election. So for that reason, I can't say that it didn't upset me. It did. I mean, I think what it represented was very grave as far as our democracy is concerned. But I agree that if it had been like if they had been motivated by something more legitimate and something like healthcare or, you know, basic human rights that are not being afforded to us by our government officials, then yeah, I wouldn't really have had an issue with it. Like when we thought that Bernie was going to get the nomination stolen from him at the Milwaukee convention in 2020, Zach and I were fully prepared to go fucking riot. You know, we were fully prepared to, you know, go participate in the protest, which likely would have turned into a riot in that event. So I can understand the energy behind it. I just wish it was actually for something real and not something stupid and conspiratorial and fake.
Yeah, I mean, I also wasn't, like I said, I wasn't terribly like upset by it. Like, obviously, crimes were committed. That kind of goes without saying. Like, as the law is written, people committed a lot of crimes. I think Donald Trump committed a crime. I think fucking Rudy Giuliani committed crimes that day, egging on a mob. Right, the kind of shit that they'll put a leftist in jail for if you stir up too much of a fuss about. They let all those motherfuckers off scot free. Right, like, you guys ever seen the movie or read about the trial of the Chicago 7? All right, they were like leading an uprising or whatever, and then they were all going to go to jail for fucking forever. Not forever, but a long time, too long. And that's kind of shit that they, you know, will do if you're like a left winger that causes an uproar, right? It's how Eugene Debs went to jail, right? Back in the World War I era, there was a law that was passed that fucking, you know, basically like an anti-insurrectionist act or something. It's the same shit. That they'll use to basically strip you of your right to the First Amendment. So it's like it's a mixed bag, right? Like those people did commit crimes, and if they were leftists, they would have been prosecuted way harder. Some of them were prosecuted, right, for like going in and like destroying shit and whatnot. But the people who I find most culpable walked away scot-free. The, you know, Donald Trump, the Rudy Giuliani, the people who really egged it on, right? Those were the people that I was mostly upset with. I was just upset with the leadership for not having to like be held accountable in a way that obviously the left would have. But on the other hand, I really do completely agree with you. Boeing 757. I wasn't outraged. I thought it was funny. I didn't ever think there was a risk of it being successful for half a second. I was not like in fear at all, right? Even I think Cori Bush was based. She was like, I'm not afraid of these people. Like, fuck these people. Like, you know, I was not afraid that night. Like, don't give them that. They can't have my fear because I'm not afraid of them, you know, which I thought was based. And I was like, that's what you kind of want to hear from a politician. It's like, fuck these people. I'm not afraid of them. Come at me. Like, I stayed in my office, like, you know, but on the other hand, if it had been left wingers, I know I would have been out there being like, fuck yeah, let's go, get after it. Fuck the government. We're taking what's ours. Like, so, you know, I won't be too hypocritical on that one. People in glass houses can't throw stones. I just agree with Gavin that they were asking for a big fat nothing burger. They were asking for democracy to be subverted. They were asking for a crime to be committed. And we would be asking, you know, to put an end to the crime of keeping people, you know, without health care.
Absolutely correct. Thank you so much, though, Bowen. We really appreciate your super chat, man. And thank you so much once again, JFLO Grappling Academy for the 199. Michael Moore agrees with Boeing 757 pilot. I'm not specifically familiar with Michael Moore's commentary. And did you remember him saying something to that effect, Zach?
I think he may have said something along the lines of he would have liked to see left-wing protesters have that audacity. I don't know. That sounds radical for Michael Moore. Normally, he's kind of been on his lib shit recently, so I don't know. But if that's true based, I love Michael Moore. You know, even though he'll say some cringy shit, like a couple of years ago, he was saying that we needed to have like Michelle Obama run for president and all kinds of like. But he's still, I mean, he is a goddamn oracle when it comes to election prognostication. For one, he went around the whole country in 2016 and told everybody that Donald Trump was going to win. And then in 2022, when I thought he was on a bag of fucking crazy pills, again, I was more sympathetic to the idea that Trump could win, but not, I still didn't think it was going to happen. But this time I really thought that the Republicans were going to run away with a big turnout. And he was like, no, they don't have good messaging. It's not working out. Like, it's going to be disappointing for the Republicans. And I was like shocked when everybody was wrong and Michael Moore was the only one that was right again. So, yeah, I mean, got nothing but love and respect for Michael Moore. He is literally the intersection of everything that we hope to embody in our life: humor, film, politics. I mean, that guy, I mean, he did wonder. He was the editor-in-chief of Mother Jones magazine back when they were actually pretty based. Like, I mean, cool stuff.
Yeah. And if all you guys know Michael Moore from is his like MSNBC appearances and stuff, you might be confused why Zach would say that. But go back and watch some of his documentaries from like the early 2000s and the late 90s as well. Or was it the late 90s or when he put out Roger and Me? Or was
Yeah, that
the
was
80s?
90s. No, that was.
Okay.
Wait, let me look. Actually, fuck, I don't. I think it was late 90s.
Roger and Me. That was 98 or 89, 1989. Go check out the film Roger and Me if you haven't. I think that's Michael Moore's best film, in my opinion. It's all about Flint, Michigan, and how Flint, Michigan was absolutely devastated economically when General Motors decided to close its doors essentially and outsource all of those jobs. Great film about what happens to communities across this country when that happens. An absolutely brilliant work of documentary filmmaking. And of course, a lot of his other movies are awesome too. Bowling for Columbine, Fahrenheit 9/11, et cetera, et cetera. You know, he's made so many great films. And if you guys haven't checked them out, then I definitely would urge you to. Again,
Fahrenheit 9/11 almost cost Bush the election, straight up.
Yeah, I know. That's such a great film. Anyway, shout out to you. Really appreciate the super chat. And yeah, that's what I was saying, Nikki O'Brien, for the 199. Right idea, wrong reasons. Yeah, I would love to see some super aggressive revolutionary spirit exerted by the left on behalf of legitimate causes, on behalf of actual human rights, not whatever deranged conspiracies the My Pillow guy is spouting.
Yeah, absolutely. So shout out to you, Nikki O'Brien, and shout out to you, Mike H. Yeah, this was really fucking disgusting. We didn't even fucking give any oxygen to it. I mean, the Tim Pool, you know, like vax injury people were, you know, trying to, you know, connect this to like myocarditis or whatever the hell they were talking about, and it was clear that it was a trauma to the heart, that, you know, palpitation basically skipped. You know, it was like something was happening like while his heart was pumping blood, and then he like stood up and fucking had a heart attack and whatnot. Anyway, people who are way smarter than me can explain it to you in a YouTube video that takes like 4 minutes that I watched, but I can't regurgitate it back to you very effectively because I watched it like 2 days ago. But anyway, yeah, it was because he got hit. I mean, it was like one of those fluke incidents, right? You watch football long enough, you're going to see fluke incidents. I mean, he got hit right in the right spot and it fucked up his heart for a second. And thank God he's going to be okay.
Right. And as I said at the time, it's pretty disgraceful. Always loves to chastise leftists for politicizing tragedies when it comes to like school shootings or stuff like that. But then as soon as someone like drops dead or, you know, gets injured, they're the first ones to be like, it was the vaccine. Yeah, no, it wasn't. Shut the fuck up.
Also, shout out to Wayne Tables. He's also barking up that tree with his girlfriend, Gavin. He wants the homies to storm the Capitol with him too.
Yeah, we had a good debate about it. She was like, those people, you know, I didn't agree with them, but that was the American spirit alive and well, you know, demanding their right. I was like, chill, like, all right, sorry if you're watching Iana, but
Gavin's gonna have to deal with this in about 30 minutes.
Yeah. Anyway, also shout out to you, Kevin, for the $3. Really appreciate that, man. Van stuff, but please don't go broke. Lower effort for the win. Yeah, I think that's probably what we're gonna have to go with. Again, it's just too costly to really be traveling coast to coast in the van and all that stuff. But definitely, you're not going to stop seeing documentary content from us. Not even close. We have a couple that we're working on right now and a couple more down the pipeline. Plus, come the 2024 general election, we'll certainly be, at least hopefully, we'll be, you know, traveling to Iowa. We talked about going to the Iowa State Fair.
The Iowa shit, so Iowa's going to suck now.
True.
They're just fucking the Vanguard left and right here at the Democratic Party. But yeah, look, I mean, we have the Kansas City local elections coming up, so we'll try and put a spotlight on that and see if we can't maybe do a special shout out for you know, some of our more local listeners. It's just yeah, you know, when we do the show, and obviously we're not going to go broke. Gavin and I are fucking responsible guys, and plus, you know we can pay rent with the money we make from the Vanguard, which is another reason why we're like low key reticent to just like fuck things up too much, because it's like we would literally like not be able to pay rent. And so, you know, Gavin and I are actual working class people. It's not just like, this isn't like ethereal money in the background. It's like, okay, we have to go live enough days so that we can keep the lights on and pay our rent. And then it's like, okay, I have to pay my student loan, so I work at a bar, and like fucking, you know what I mean? Like our lives are very much like probably like your lives are, right? And it's so weird because we're honest and transparent about it, and everybody else that does the show is like you know, they either want to like pretend that they're like MSNBC level. Some of them are, right? And it's just like they can do anything, but nobody will ever just sit here and talk to you, be like, guys, straight up, we like can't afford to make that kind of content. Like, you know what? Sorry. Like, you know, we try and be as responsible with the money that we have here. We try and make great content for you guys. And when there's stuff left over, we drive to Minneapolis and fucking try and like put all of our chips in that basket and go to, you know, make a video with Jesse Ventura. And then it does not even come close. I mean, how much money do we make on that video? $30. Like after
Probably not even that.
Not even that, like $20 from YouTube ad revenue on you. So that's what we're talking about. It's like we're talking about like if Gavin and I want to go to the Iowa State Fair, we're talking about we have to invest like $2,800 from our savings account that we don't have, and then like make like $80 back. And it's like we try and do the math, and it's like, when is the money going to be there? Like, can we do this? And we've tried, you know. So we'll give it another shot. We're not giving up, but it's just like, if you guys are wondering, like, why are you guys treating this like it's Cenk Uygur's book? It's because, well, nobody's giving us $100,000 advance to do this shit, and we are actual working class people. But I apologize if we, you know, the only downside to being completely honest with you guys is like oftentimes Gavin and I just spitball with each other on air, and we'll be like, that's a great idea, we should try and fucking do that. And then it's like, well, the clock's ticking, you announced it. And it's like, well, fuck, we're also just two loudmouths with like fucking real lives. I don't know. So anyway, shout out to you, Kevin. And we appreciate everybody that just listens and likes to bullshit with us as well.
100%. Thank you so much, Kevin. And yeah, this is another great point, comrade, for the $5. Thank you so much. It would be harder for leftists to storm the Capitol, as the police have no problem brutalizing the left, even when peacefully protesting. Yeah, that's so true. And as I said earlier in the stream, the craziest thing about Jan 6 is not that it happened. It's that the cops let it happen. You know what I'm saying? Like, the cops never would have let Black Lives Matter protesters or environmentalist protesters or, you know, communists or anything like that pull that off. It never would have happened. They would have been dead, you know, 100 feet before they even reached the fucking premises, like, you know, the fucking Capitol grounds, right? So that's a very valid point, comrade. Thank you for the $5.
Yeah, absolutely. Shout out to you, comrade. And shout out to you, Nikki, as well. Michael Moore is awesome. Gave me hope in the 90s. I wish I would have gotten to see Michael Moore raw in his like real form as an adult in the 90s. Because that's when I feel like he was really on fire. Like 2001, 2002 were like golden years for Michael Moore. And obviously 89 all the way up to that. I mean, he accomplished so much. He made some great movies. And then all the way up to, I mean, Capitalism, A Love Story. I think all of those movies could be defined as classics. And it's not that the ones that came after that aren't good. It's just that like initial like half a dozen films, I think represent like a really, really strong landmark in leftist political discourse, because not only did he take a leftist documentary and make it the best, the highest grossing documentary film of all time. That movie is incredibly rewatchable for being a documentary. It is not dry at all, and he basically pioneered American documentary filmmaking with the work that he was doing by making it so humorous and so well paced and so earnest and from the heart. I mean, Michael Moore is a real wonder. He's an American treasure. And I honestly, he's like one of the top guys left on my list in my own personal heart of people to interview and engage with, because I mean, I've always looked up to the guy. Even when we disagreed, I think that he's a tremendous example for what you can really accomplish with the medium of filmmaking.
And there's like no real modern day equivalent to him either. Like, not obviously he's still alive, he still makes movies, but like no one has really filled that void that he was occupying with that work. You know what I'm saying?
It was that fucking guy from Gaslands that won't shut the fuck up. He's really annoying. His name's Josh or whatever. He has like the worst Twitter account ever. That guy is like the best we've got. What the fuck is his last name? He was
shitting all over the Planet of the Humans.
Yeah,
right?
I was gonna say he was like going after fucking Michael Moore. I was like, this man ran so you could fucking slog behind it. Not that the Gasland movies weren't, you know, good in their own right.
Josh Fox, right?
Josh Fox, yeah. Anyway, that guy's kind of annoying as shit.
Yeah, and oh no, don't get me wrong. There's great lefties that are making documentary content like Abby Martin, but I'm specifically speaking to the kind of sense of humor that he infused with it, that rewatchability that Zach referenced, because it's a tough sell to get someone to watch a political documentary, especially someone that's not already super interested or invested in politics. Like, oh, let's go watch a movie about how the earth is dying and how everything sucks. Like, it's not a great pitch, right? And that's not to say that the work that Abby Martin does is not, you know, entertaining, and it's very well made, but like Michael Moore just brought such a levity and such a sense of humor and such a personality to his work.
And you could watch it at the multiplex. Like, you could watch it at the regular cinema.
Exactly. I you know, have rewatched all of his movies multiple times just because they are entertaining, and obviously they're very powerful as well, but like they're funny. Have a good sense of humor. Like, even though they're oftentimes dealing with incredibly depressing subject matters. So
Everything down to the soundtrack in those movies is so well thought out. Like you'll listen to like George Bush say something stupid and then it'll just go into like banjo music. And it's like, wow, that was perfectly cut to make you laugh so hard. And shout out to Fleon Trotsky, LOL at your name, but also the fact that your brother brought you to see Roger and Me when it came out. Holy shit. That's a cool experience. And I wonder what your thought process was, because nobody would have really known who Michael Moore was at that time. You know, he literally just kind of, you know, notebook and a prayer to, you know, camera and a prayer, right? Like that's cool.
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. I'm such a big fan of that film. I do think it's my favorite Michael Moore film. And also, speaking of his use of music and the soundtracks, I think that the use of the Beach Boys, Wouldn't It Be Nice, in Roger and Me might be the single best use of a pop song in any documentary film ever. So powerful the way he uses that. So yeah, definitely check out that one.
Understand.
You guys have.
Oh,
what was it?
I was just gonna say he understands emotional manipulation so well instinctively, right? And he also he you know, he would always kind of allude to what you were saying. He was like, if you want people to watch your documentary, you have to think about how people are gonna receive this on their date night, right? He was like, people want nonfiction shit. It's the most all you see on television is nonfiction. Why will people watch that, but they won't watch your movie that's nonfiction? Because your movie is kind of like going and watching the fucking Nature Channel that gets wheeled into your classroom with the fucking VHS tape from, you know, the late 80s. And it's like, that's not exciting. You know, you need to challenge people. You need to stimulate people. You need to make them laugh, make them cry, make them feel a range of emotions while they're in your movie. And then they have something to talk about for the rest of the night. So it's actually a great date movie. Now you get to really know who you are with. You get to talk about the environment or healthcare or whatever. GM closing its, it's production facility, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I definitely urge you guys to check out Michael Moore's shit if you haven't seen it. Especially start with Roger and Me if you haven't seen any of his work. Start there. That's his masterpiece, in my opinion. But you know, going all the way up to Capitalism, a love story, as Zach said.
Would say Fahrenheit 9/11 is right up there with Roger and Me as like his those are probably his two best films if you really like put a gun to my head, because Fahrenheit 9/11 just rocked the political discourse so much when it came out.
Yeah, it also won the Palme d'Or, which is pretty cool. Actually, Tarantino was the head of the jury that year. He awarded,
and he gave his legendary Oscars fucking response, where it almost ruined his entire career. People don't talk about that. People are like, oh, how much? These people are just libs. They won't sacrifice anything, dude. Michael Moore almost walked away from his entire career. People wouldn't speak to him. He had to hire round-the-clock security for his family because there were constant death threats on his life. Like, you guys do not understand the hysteria of what was going on when those guys opposed the Iraq war in peak Bush era, and said that it was like an illegal war and that they were not going to support it, and that George Bush was a fake fake lies, fake president, all this kind of shit. Oh my God, it was beautiful. It was a beautiful moment, and so many things in the Michael Moore canon. That dude's a hero. He directed the music video for the Rage Against the Machine song, Guerrilla Radio. A fun fact.
Yeah, great stuff. And we would play that Oscar speech here, but the last time we did, we got demonetized. So,
fucking Academy.
Yeah, but yeah, if you guys haven't seen that, also go check out his Oscar acceptance speech when he won Best Documentary Feature for Bowling for Columbine, and live on television called out the George Bush administration for lying us into a war, which he got booed for, even by the so-called people always say that Hollywood is just a bunch of liberals and stuff. Well, they were all booing Michael Moore for being anti-war, which is pretty crazy. Anyway, also shout out to you once again, Nikki. Thanks for the $1.99. Start local, build nationwide. 100%, totally agree.
Yeah, I think this comes back to one of those things where we might reflect on this and think about how it's really obvious that Gavin and I were 20 when we started the Vanguard, because we really did just think start a channel, buy a van, get 1 million subscribers, change our whole lives to covering politics on the ground and being the Bernie bro movement. And then obviously that didn't work out. So we have pivoted a little bit, and now I think it would be nice to just plant a seedling locally, and because Gavin and I we're big local bros. I know Gavin's in New Orleans now, so maybe he'll turn his back on us eventually, but Kansas City is our fucking home, right? We love Kansas City. It is the place that built us. It's the place that defines me, and I imagine Gavin feels the same way. So doing more local politics, I always just never even considered doing local politics for the Vanguard, because I just imagined our audience would revolt and be like, fuck you guys, why do I care what happens in Kansas City, Missouri? You know what I mean?
Yeah. But like with our Casey Tenets documentary, that's yes, it's based in Kansas City, but anyone could be doing that in any city. There could be tenant unions just like Casey Tenets that are, getting the same results and, pioneering similar tactics of activism. Either way, shout out to you, Nikki. I think that's definitely a good strategy, a good idea. And we've been addressing super chats for so long, but we do have to get into our last story, which is the fact that there was a failed coup attempt in Brazil. Hundreds, over 1,000 people actually have been detained in Brazil after these pro-Bolsonaro riots. The police and troops retook office buildings in the capital that had been stormed by supporters of Jair Bolsonaro's, Brazil's far-right former president, who falsely believed there was a stolen election. At least 1,200 protesters were detained for questioning in the wake of the storming of Brazil's Capitol buildings, a spokesman for the civil police said on Monday, as the authorities began dismantling the tent city where supporters of Bolsonaro had been camping out since he lost October's election. The detentions came a day after one of the worst attacks on the country's democracy in the 38 years since the end of the military dictatorship. And that's a good point. Brazil's democracy is still fairly young in the grand scheme of things. 38 years ago, it was literally a military dictatorship. And thousands of Bolsonaro supporters broke into government buildings in the capital, Brasilia, on Sunday to protest what they falsely claimed was a stolen election. And of course, there's been no evidence of any actual electoral fraud in this case. Also, seemingly none of
I would just add that any electoral fraud that did come likely came from Bolsonaro when he was cutting off all those fucking highways.
That's a great point, Zach. Yeah, the only one committing fraud, the only one trying to do any anti-democratic fuckery was Bolsonaro himself, which is incredibly ironic. And here's some video footage of the Bolsonaristas, or whatever they call them, Bolsonaristas, I apologize, invading Congress in mass. And I'll play this without the audio so we can keep talking. But yeah, here they are swarming into the Capitol, which is pretty crazy. I mean, this looks exactly like January 6th, as many people have pointed out, despite the difference in architecture. They have an interesting Congress building here in Brazil. This looks like an airport or something. Like the U.S. Capitol building is such a grand, and it looks like what us here in America think of as a Capitol building. This looks like a fucking airport or something. I don't really know what's going on with their architecture style as it relates to government facilities over in Brazil. No offense. But yeah, there's some, pretty crazy footage of people. It looks like a bunch of ants swarming around the fucking spilled soda or something like that. But that was a random analogy. Sorry. But here's another video of some of the Bolsonaro supporters wreaking havoc inside the government facilities. Live from Planalto Palace, the Bolsonaristas smash, destroy, and ransack the inside of the same building where Lula was just inaugurated last week. Once again, no police presence in sight. So here's some of that footage.
Muito gás, muita fumaça.
Mas é de cima que eu despacho. É de lá, essa é de cima.
Muito.
Yeah, so there's some footage of the attack on the Congress. The funny thing is, though, that several people have noted is that the Congress members and Lula himself, they weren't even present in these buildings. They were all like out of town or, elsewhere doing diplomatic business or, whatever the fuck they do. Like, they weren't actually there. On January 6th, when Trump supporters attacked the U.S. Capitals, it was because the Congress members were certifying the results of the election. That's what they were trying to prevent from happening. And that's why we had all these Congress members like cowering in fear, like scared for their lives as the Trump supporters like bashed in the doors and, came in and were chanting "Hang Mike Pence" and all that stuff. But in this case, it doesn't really seem like there's an apparent goal for these Bolsonaristas. Like they're just causing a ruckus for the sake of causing a ruckus. I guess they just want to be loud and be proud about their support for Bolsonaro. But it's not like Lula was already officially confirmed as the president of Brazil. It's not like they were trying to stop that from happening. It already fucking happened, bro. The ship has sailed. So I'm not really sure what the end goal of this was. And also, I'm not really sure what exactly sparked or motivated it. It is just like the fucking pot boiling over. I'm not entirely sure.
Yeah, that's the exact question that I feel like is the only question really remaining, right? It's like, what led to this? Other than the fact that it's obvious that there was some inspiration from the Donald Trump presidency, right? And the fact that it really planted the seed in people's minds both before the election, which is not a projection of confidence. Like, hey, if I lose, it's because this election was probably tampered with, right? Like Bolsonaro was doing that too. And he flirted with it a lot. And I think he tried to portray himself at least in some ways like Donald Trump. They were very similar in some ways. And I think he really just modeled himself after him after he saw the success that had brought for Trump. So I think that all of that's obvious, right? But I would like to know, like, I probably should do more homework, and I imagine it'll come out over time. Like, but what was it that really led these people there? Because you're right, it was completely directionless. And at least on January 6th, or with these protesters that happened in the United States that we're more familiar with, we know that what they were, at least in theory, trying to do was stop the inauguration or whatever, right? Or just like, and like stop the certification of the presidential votes. But as you pointed out, that already happened. So was this just like a death rattle where it was just like, we don't want to give up and now we feel like there's nothing going on, so we're going to go throw a tantrum somewhere and break a bunch of shit? Like, that's fine, but that doesn't really bode well for your movement, right? Like, that's not really inspiring anybody else to like take on arms and come with you. And then you see like what, fucking over 1,000 of them were just arrested and hauled off to jail immediately. It does make you scratch your head and say, what was the meaning of all of this? And who planted the seeds in your head to make you think that this was a good idea? Because again, when it comes to January 6th, we know exactly who planted those seeds in their head. That's why when you were in the bathroom, but I've made this spiel before, like the people who I was really frustrated with January 6th, and I thought it showed the most criminal behavior, was like a guy like Rudy Giuliani and obviously Donald Trump himself, for really egging them on and planting all of those seeds in their brain, like, oh, to the Capitol, like, oh, we've got to protest this. Like, you could at least see how they were getting like egged on and that they were going to like protest. And also I think that they modeled the marching through the streets off of like some left-wing protests that they'd seen over the past couple of years. So that all made sense. But yeah, with the Brazilian situation, I'm not as familiar with what was the catalyst, like why then. And again, with Bolsonaro in Miami, like, gastrointestinally clogging himself at KFC and, loitering at the fucking supermarket while people mock him and video him just existing because they're like, hey, remember when you were a fucking wannabe fascist leader of Brazil and now you're just here in Miami? Like, funny how that works.
Yeah, here's an article about that. I don't know why fuck Whoopi Goldberg is on screen right now, but Bolsonaro was admitted to the U.S. hospital as Biden condemns the outrageous attack on the Brazilian government. And he's still dealing with these abdominal issues. He was admitted to a hospital in Orlando for abdominal pain, according to the presidential office. News of Bolsonaro's hospitalization comes hours after President Joe Biden condemned the outrageous storming of the three major Brazilian government buildings. A heavy police presence remained in Brazil, yada, yada, yada. Bolsonaro has had strong episodes of abdominal pain, including occlusion since he was stabbed during a campaign event in 2018. He is undergoing medical exams at Advent Health Orlando and might be spending the night, yada, yada, yada. Either way, this guy cannot stay out of the hospital. Not quite as much of an alpha male as some people on the right make him out to be, that's for sure. And also, Lula himself actually did put out a statement regarding this attack on the Brazilian capital. He said, oops, wrong tab, 1 second. Lula responded and said the following. He said, you must have followed the barbarism in Brasilia today. These people we call fascists, the most abominable thing in politics, invaded the palace and the Congress. We think there was a lack of security, and this is probably a fairly poor translation. It's done by Google Translate, which is always a little bit faulty, so keep that in mind. But still, that's the point of his first tweet. And then he goes on to say, whoever did this will be found and punished. democracy guarantees the right to free expression, but it also requires people to respect institutions. There is no precedent in the history of the country for what they did today, for what they must be punished. So I think that's an appropriately strong statement. He's saying these people are fascists. They will be found and they will be punished. There is no precedent for this, and it will not go. It will not be allowed.
Yeah, I mean, in a more rational country, that's probably what would have happened immediately, right? Instead, the Democrats saw a opportunity to make this a long-term political fundraising issue.
Right.
So they had to draw it out. They had to do an investigation, a January 6th committee, parade everybody out so that MSNBC and CNN could talk about how ridiculous and how unprecedented this was, and how Claire McCaskill could talk about how in her family every year we're starting a tradition where on the 4th of July we watch this and we remember that our democracy is fragile and must be fought for. Just like fucking crazy ravings of people, because it's like, okay, it was obviously a joke. This was bad security, and we all know if they'd been left-wingers, you would have just shot them all in cold blood. Okay, it would have been called the fucking January 6th massacre, and there would have been like 500 dead leftists on the ground. Okay, that's what would have happened. So I think that Lula just coming out here and saying, yeah, we're arresting anybody that committed a crime is like pretty par for the course for what you could expect from like a more reasonable leader, right? And obviously the dude is trying to walk a tightrope between being swift and dealing with this, and then also coming across as like needlessly tyrannical because they were his opposition. So I think he does a good job there.
Absolutely. And of course, like we mentioned, over 1,200 people have been detained that participated in this violent attack on the Capitol, which also I think is an appropriate measure. The Democrats, they always love to talk about how fragile democracy and how crazy January 6th was and what a threat it represents to our ways and our values as a democratic nation and all this stuff. But when push comes to shove, they didn't really do much about it. They impeached Trump, which was meaningless, it was completely meaningless. And then they did the January 6th commission, which led to absolutely fucking nothing. But Trump is still a free man. He's the one that inspired all of this. He's the one that spread the lie in the first place and, inspired his supporters to do what they did. He's the one that actually tried to subvert U.S. democracy, and he's running for president again. So like, if it's such an attack on democracy, if it's such a grave threat to our way of life, then fucking do something about it so this guy doesn't become president again and pull it off successfully. And he'll be successful this time. You know what I'm saying? Like, actually do something about it. And it seems like that's what Lula is hinting at. Hopefully Bolsonaro is extradited and is held responsible and faces criminal consequences in Brazil, not necessarily specifically for what happened yesterday. There's no evidence that he orchestrated it, but for his anti-democratic musings surrounding the election results in general, and for basically trying to steal the election himself on the day of the election, blocking off highways and areas of the country which were heavy Lula supporting areas and communities, and basically trying to prevent the people from casting votes for his political opponent. So I hope he does face some consequences, and I hope that there's further investigation to see if he was, orchestrating this or in some way inspiring what happened yesterday.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we covered this a few weeks ago, but it's just a good reminder of what happens to, Jair Bolsonaro if his number one political opponent, his chief political opponent, is not behind bars, but is in fact a free man to participate in the Brazilian electoral process. So, like I said, we don't hold anybody accountable for fucking anything in our country, but I hope that they're able to figure that out in Brazil and actually bring some justice and stability there. And I look forward to seeing what Lula does as president of Brazil, and seeing what changes he can bring, because one of the chief concerns as an international person, right, and as a non-Brazilian who's interested in the global politic, is what's going on with the rainforest is going to be a big deal, and Bolsonaro was fucking bulldozing that shit. So if Lula doesn't turn around that policy, I think that's going to be something to be critical of him for, because that's something that absolutely has to happen. I don't expect that Lula will maintain the kind of policies that Bolsonaro was but pursuing, but that's something that's chief on my list of things to watch, and also just see how the rest of this unfolds. But definitely interesting to see this kind of event occur with the obvious predecessor coming in January 6th.
Absolutely. And before we get out of here, I did want to quickly read an excerpt from this great piece published by Jeremy Corbyn in the Tribune. Brazil's insurrection is a threat to global democracy. I highly recommend you guys check out this entire article. But there's specifically, I wanted to read this paragraph. He says, ultimately, the insurrection is a reminder of the additional barriers that left-wing governments must overcome to achieve real change. Lula campaigned on a platform of social justice, indigenous rights, and an end to deforestation. It's not just the transformative program that has compelled the intolerant far right to throw their toys out of the pram. It's the nature of how this transformative program was won, by mobilizing a coalition of political parties, trade unions, and social movements, parties, unions, and movements that brought millions of workers, indigenous people, and marginalized communities together. So again, I thought that was really well put, really well articulated by Jeremy Corbyn. I urge you guys to check out his entire article, Tribune Mag.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, great point. Always great to hear from Jeremy Corbyn when he publishes op-eds. Bernie Sanders also had an op-ed recently, not about this, but it's always good when you get some, at least some working class perspective and from the people who know how the sausage is made. So shout out.
And another good point by Corbyn, too. He says it's unlikely that last night's events will enjoy the same continued coverage as the events in the United States 2 years ago. Perhaps it's because fewer commentators are concerned by coups that overthrow a left-wing government. Perhaps it's because the coup is happening in South America. Most likely, it's both. Those of us who understand the significance of Lula's victory know what's at stake if it's taken away. We know that democracy is worth fighting for. So again, really powerful stuff. Highly recommend you guys check out Jeremy Corbyn's entire article. I thought he articulated that really beautifully.
Yeah, you can tell he's such an effective communicator when you read his written word. And honestly, that's something that I think that even more so than Bernie Sanders, that's something that Jeremy Corbyn really excels at, is that the dude's quite eloquent. And I mean, maybe that's just the British in him. Like, he just talks in a different way. So when I read it, I'm like, wow, this man is academic. But when you listen to him, it's the same thing. It's like, holy shit, this is like a male Mary Poppins telling me all this shit. But anyway.
Yeah, and it does look like we have a couple more super chats to cover before we get out of here today. Really appreciate all of you guys for tuning in and for these super chats as well. Thank you, Nikki O'Brien, for the $4.99. I saw Fahrenheit 9/11 in Kansas City. Bought a T-shirt outside that said, "The only Bush I trust is my own." That's funny. That's definitely a throwback to the Bush era. I have a lot of nostalgia for that era, and that is a real throwback, Nikki.
Yeah, shout out to you, Nikki. It reminds me of the Harold and Kumar shirt, which is it just says "I heart Bush, the pussy, not the president." Anyway, but yeah, in that same line.
I need to get one of those.
That would be so retro now.
I know.
It's kind of like when we went to go see Gavin and I one time, we just decided that we would dress up like outlandishly as fuck and go to the premiere of The Beach Bomb. And so I had like a bandana on and like a fucking like these like crazy skinny jeans and then a big shirt that said "I support our boys in Operation Desert Storm," which was obviously a joke, but anyway.
Yeah, that was hilarious. And yeah, this is the shirt that Zach was referencing, famously worn by actor Kal Penn in Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle, which is one of my favorite stoner comedies. But anyway, yeah, shout out to you, Nikki. Again, have a lot of nostalgia for the Bush era. That's when Zach and I were growing up, and that's a real throwback, like I said. So shout out to you, Nikki. Really appreciate the super chats today. Shout out to you, Virtuoso. Really appreciate the $5 once again. Still haven't seen Roger and Me, but Bowling for Columbine and Sicko are my two favorite Michael Moore documentaries. Yeah, that's dope, man. Definitely recommend Roger and Me. And I actually have not seen Sicko. It's one of the only Michael Moore docs that I haven't seen. But he was really ahead of the curve on the whole movement for universal healthcare, right? Like, he was talking about that before a lot of other people were. Before Bernie Sanders ran for president and kind of ignited the nationwide movement for Medicare for All. He was talking about a fucked up healthcare system. So I need to watch Sicko. I'm sure it's good. Have you seen that one, Zach?
Yeah, and it's actually really, really ahead of its time because he was actually making that like in the lead up to Obama's first run. So it came out in 2007, and basically what he's trying to do is make the case to the Obama voters who know that healthcare is fucked in this country to be like, let's just take care of it. Let's just do single payer. So he goes to like Cuba, he goes to Ukraine, he goes to France, and he's like, would you guys, or Canada too, wherever he goes, a bunch of places, kind of like Where to Invade Next model. And he goes there and he's like, would you guys trade your guys' healthcare system for America's? And they're all like, fuck no, are you crazy? And then they'll be like, guess how much it costs to get X, Y, and Z done if you don't have health insurance in America? And they're all like, have their mind blown and shit. So it was really ahead of its time, and it paved the way for what a lot of people did to make the point about universal healthcare and, documentary format later on with the Bernie Sanders era. So yeah, Michael Moore always like 10 steps ahead of the game when it comes to that kind of shit. And keep the van going. Shout out to you. I have the van. The van is going. Every time I get like nervous that it's gonna break down, I go out there and I just turn it on and it goes. Like I had to, like one day it just stopped turning on. I had to take the battery to where did I take it? Like Advanced Auto Parts or whatever, and then they had to like recharge it or whatever. I had to get my brother to come with me because I don't know fucking anything about vans. But yeah, we got that bitch. It's still out there. It's still giving me anxiety every time I think about fucking driving it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Shout out to you, D-Ray. Really do appreciate that. And also shout out to you, Fleon Trotsky, for the $10. That's really generous. I remember Roger and me being hilarious and very affirming of my own 12-year-old politics. You must have been a pretty sophisticated 12-year-old, Leon. That's awesome. I'm going to have to watch it again. Keep up the good work, lads. Thank you so much. Yeah. A lot of good Michael Moore discussion today. A lot of good reminiscing about Michael Moore. I'm glad you guys share our passion for his documentary work. Again, it seems like a lot of people of our age just kind of know him from like his MSNBC appearances. But you really got to go back and watch those films, guys. You really got to go watch Roger and Me and Fahrenheit 9/11. I promise you will be blown away. Even if you think Michael Moore is like a cringy shit lib or whatever, there is no way you will not be impressed and moved by his work, especially, like I said, those early films, all the way up to Capitalism, A Love Story, and even beyond. You know, his newer stuff's good too. But yeah.
It's good. It's just not quite as sharp, right? I
Right.
mean, like he's gone for a different kind of style of filmmaking in these more recent ones, more like montage. I don't know, just different. And then Fahrenheit 11/9, it was like more of an homage to Fahrenheit 9/11. Anyway, so yes, they're good, but he was on a whole other level for a while, in an insane level. So.
Yeah. And the one great part of Fahrenheit 11/9 was the segment on Bernie Sanders getting the nomination stolen from him by Hillary Clinton. I thought that documentary was overall a bit unfocused and not as, up to par with some of his best films, but there was that specific segment where he really delved into the undemocratic nature of the DNC, taking the nomination from Bernie Sanders in 2016 that I thought was just a brilliant expose. So definitely check out that film as well, at least for that segment.
Yeah, and the other thing, if you're interested in him as a guy and maybe not as much of a film buff, he has a great book called Here Comes Trouble. And it really is an interesting just picture of an American life, for one, because he got to grow up at the tail end of what is widely considered the American dream, right? Like, and he talks about how he got to have that. Like, he was living in Flint. His dad worked, for GM for all these years. They could go on vacation. He remembers going to like the World's Fair, and he remembers being able to go to, the nation's capital and be proud of our country and all of these kinds of things. And then he sees what's happened after that, right? And it was like right as that started to be taken away was when he aged, and instead of developing these politics of hatred, it was all about camaraderie and love, and how can we build a better nation, one that's not hateful and prejudiced towards other members of its citizenry, but is still able to provide a suburban lifestyle for everyone, and how can we do that without offloading all of our needs and exploiting the global South and the global East for the things that we need and the resources that we want and all that kind of stuff. And he's hilarious. So I really recommend his book too. Here Comes Trouble.
Yeah, I haven't actually read that myself, but I definitely would be interested in doing so.
It's fucking
Either
good.
way, yeah, I'll check it out. If you have a copy, I'll definitely give it a read. But yeah, thanks so much, Fleon Trotsky. Love your name. Really appreciate the generous super chat as well. And shout out to you, Bookworm Skates, for the $4.99. Hell yeah, authoritarian leftism, gulag the fash. Not quite sure if you're being sarcastic or not, but in reference to the comments I was making earlier about the fact that Lula was correctly exerting some force and saying this will not stand. These anti-democratic fascists will face consequences for their action. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if that's authoritarian to say you have to face consequences for your actions and face some accountability for your crimes. I'm not saying that these people should spend the rest of their lives in some shitty prison or something like that. Of course not. I'm an abolitionist, but should people face consequences when they flagrantly break laws and commit violent crimes? Of course.
This aggression will not stand, man. That's all I could think after you said that. But Bookworm's case, I'm pretty sure you're being sarcastic right now. because I am down to gulag the fascists, and if you aren't, I don't think you are a leftist. No, I'm just kidding. But yeah, put your money where your mouth is, huh? Do you want the fascists around or not? You know, how do you get rid of them without the gulag? All right, I'm just saying. There's one thing I agree on with the French, and it ain't their culinary chops. Okay, yes, sir. So no, anyway, I'm
gulag
sure
the elites, you know, gulag the fucking billionaires and the Bolsonaros and the Trumps. As far as their supporters,
just kidding,
you know,
owners of Google advertisements.
Exactly. Yeah.
Kevin's
this is all
totally
satire.
joking right now. No, yeah, and shout out to you in general, Bookworm Skates. I saw you chatting a little bit earlier, and I was like, oh fuck, I haven't seen Bookworm Skates in the comment section in a while. So hopefully you're doing well, tuning into the Vanguard.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bookworm Skates. We always appreciate hearing from you. And shout out to you, Hysteric Raider. Bolsonaro will be protected by America. He's our capitalist overlord's favorite puppet. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. We'll see what happens. Some people like AOC have been calling for his extradition. We'll have to see if that happens. I kind of doubt it, but you know, we'll keep you guys updated.
Oh yeah, I mean that's the whole trade-off, right? Like you do everything by the book. You know, you are America's little puppet. You do whatever our bidding is, and then you get to come and live in, you know, luxury in Miami, Florida, when you have to flee your own South or Central American country because you were ousted by the proletariat by some miracle. Otherwise, we'll just assassinate you when we're done with you. So really, he got the payout of a lifetime. You got a friendly. I mean, Brazil's a big country, though. You can't just assassinate. I mean, not in 2023. You can't. Like, that's a global powerhouse. I mean, not a global powerhouse, but like they're a player in the international stage. You can't just, you know, assassinate the fucking president of Japan or Brazil or, you know, like that. So, but I mean, if this had been Venezuela, like we would not, or, you know, Bolivia, we would, you know, anyway.
Wasn't the ex-president of Japan just assassinated?
Not by the United States is what I'm saying, though.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I'm saying that we could have, like, you know, back in the day, sure, like,
Right.
we installed this guy in Peru, and now it's time to get rid of him. Or, like, oh, this guy was in charge in Nicaragua or El Salvador, and now it's time to get rid of him. Like, you know,
I
the
didn't
color
realize you were talking
revolution.
about the U.S. Yeah.
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was referring to
Sorry.
color revolutions that we
Gotcha,
you know.
gotcha. Sorry, I got distracted by something. And I was like, well, technically, someone did kind of just do that, but no,
That was
I see what you're
crazy.
saying, right? Shinzo Abe
Bolsonaro,
or
we should
whatever?
mention, somebody did stab that motherfucker while he was running for president. I mean, yeah, that was insane. And then, did you know that guy? I'm pretty sure a judge like threw away that case. That guy that stabbed Bolsonaro like never went to jail. Like they said that he was like mentally unfit to stand trial or something. So he's probably in like a mental health ward. But yeah, that dude stabbed the shit out of Bolsonaro like 5 years ago.
I do not condone violence, but based. Anyway, no, I'm just kidding. Shout out to you, Hysteric Raider.
Yeah, absolutely. Problems in South America and Africa seem to get ignored. Yeah, I mean, South America, I feel like it's more coverage than Africa, right? Because, I mean, unless it's like, you know, the destruction of Libya or like Arab Spring or like, you know, look at this new wine vineyard that's opened in Cape Town, South Africa. Like that's all you hear about from the mainstream media. It's like some destruction is happening in a place like Sudan or like go vacation at this villa in South Africa. You know, it's like those are the two things that they have to say about it. Or it's like, you know, Nigeria is really blossoming, but don't go there yet. No, those are the kind of things that they usually report on with Africa. So
yeah, that's so true. You're totally correct, Mike. Yeah, it's usually you only hear about these countries when something horrible is happening, which is really unfortunate. Because a lot of these countries are beautiful places that, and they're better off than you might think. Just hearing the constant negative coverage of them, you just think they're all like fucking war zones and falling apart and stuff. It's like, no, there's actually a lot of countries that have their shit together and they're doing right by their people, and that are quite progressive in many regards. So especially in South America, you know, there's a lot of countries in South America that actually have some pretty like based leaders, and like, you know, countries like, I think it was either Uruguay or Paraguay that's like had legal cannabis for like way longer.
Oh, that's
than any of
Uruguay. Yeah,
Uruguay, like underreported on stuff like that. Anyway, beautiful places. I'd love to visit South America myself. I've never been, unfortunately. But yeah, shout out to you, Mike. Thanks so much. And thanks
whatever
everyone.
happened to that dude from Chile, right? That one dude that was like had the like satanic shirt on or whatever, but he was like a young guy and he became like the leader of Chile. I think his name is like
I'm not
Gabriel
sure.
Boric or something like that. Anyway,
I actually don't know. I remember hearing about that, but again, probably thanks to the lack of coverage from mainstream media, I'm not sure what's going on in Chile right now. I need to do my research. But yeah, shout out to you, Mike H. And like I said, thanks everyone for tuning in today. It's been an awesome live stream. Was not expecting to stream for almost 2.5 hours today. I was like, we'll probably be on stream for an hour or two at max, just because I didn't think we had that much to talk about. But you guys gave us a lot to react to. Really appreciate all the super chats, you guys. Always appreciate hanging out with you guys. Such a fun time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, peace out, everybody. Great show. Shout out to the comrades. Shout out to the Vanguardian, Super Vanguardian. Shout out to all you lovely fuckers in the comment section in the live chat. Hit that like button and subscribe button. Even if you're hate watching, it's free. We brought the hate watchers out for a while, gang. And I like watching the team Vanguard go at it with the hate watchers. Y'all do good repping us. You guys hold it down for us in the comment section. I'm watching you. I see you. Some of our regular warriors. Vanguard army down here. No, I'm kidding, of course. But shout out to everybody. We like our heterodox argument. I like it that you guys try and keep us honest. Like, we will engage with the chat. Like, we really try not to ban anybody that's not just like spamming porn in our fucking advertisements. Like, if you say something rude about our guest, we're usually way more sensitive about it just because they're taking their time to come on our show. But say what the fuck you want about me and Gavin for the most part. You got to like spam your shit and be annoying as all hell for us to ban you.
Or start like saying slurs or something like that.
Yeah, you can't do that. Sorry.
Yeah,
they're about Gavin and me. You can't say slurs, and even then, it's a slim pickings list before we'll decide to just be away with you.
Right. Anyway, shout out to the patrons. Also, specific shout out to Casey O'Leary, our latest patron supporter. Thank you so much for the support, Casey. And yeah, shout out to everyone supporting the Vanguard. You can join the crew by hitting the link in the description. Join the Vanguard army, as Zach said. So yeah, hit up that link in the description, guys. Patreon.com/the Vanguard channel. And yeah, you have to be a patron to use slurs. No, I'm just kidding. That's
NATO imperialist sympathizers. Vanguard refers to fans as army. Coming next on Revolutionary Blackout Network.
That's funny. Anyway, appreciate you guys all for tuning in. It was an awesome stream today. Really appreciate hanging out with you guys and hearing your opinions in the chat as well. Hit up that link in the description if you want to support the show. There's also a PayPal link if you're feeling extra generous and want to support the show that way. That's also a great way to help us out. And of course, hit that like, subscribe, and notification button if you have not already. Also really helps us out. But yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in today. We'll be back soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Peace out, everybody. Thanks for everybody that tuned in.
Peace out.